If committee members in the room are ready, we'll call the meeting to order. All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee to order this morning. I believe we do have a quorum present physically in the room. The first order of business is the call to order in the introductions. I could ask the clerk to call the roll and indicate that you are present either online or in person.
Bill Roberts.
Here.
Rick Fernandez.
Here.
David Bailey. Carolyn Brown. I do see her online. Hoyt Prindle.
Here.
Christina Bosworth.
Here.
Miaza Morrison.
Here.
Aya Yasin. Stephen Hollenkamp.
Here.
Nicole Rice.
Here.
Alexis Bobak. Christina Costa. Artie Fryer.
Present.
Nicholas Glover. Don Skelton.
Here.
Ed Mrzewski.
Here.
Did I get that right?
Really good.
Good job.
Jonathan Knudsen.
Here.
Sharon Gamond. Eric Lamb. Terrence Trott.
Here. Good morning.
Rick Richmond.
Here.
Joshua Frank.
Here.
We do have an in-person quorum. Some members are participating virtually because of medical reasons in the local declaration of emergency. And for recording purposes, please state your name when you're speaking.
Gail, I see that Alexis Bobak just logged on while you were in the middle of the calling roll. I'm not sure if you called her before she logged on or not, but it looks like she is present.
I'll double check everybody against the online attendees as well to make sure that everything is updated. And I see Sharon is also on.
Good. Morning, Sharon. Good to see you.
Hi, sorry, I got really hung up today with Patty's Day coming. It's a little crazy for me at work, so I'm running around.
It's good to have you. We've got a couple of housekeeping things. We have a full agenda today. We have a 9:15 scheduled portion of our member interest, at which time we're going to have a report. That is time sensitive because one of the presenters has to wrap up by 9:45. So if we are taking public comment and 9:15 time arrives, I'm going to put a pause on public comment. And then I'd like to wrap this meeting up today by noon, if at all possible, to kind of limit us to our 3-hour schedule. First item on our agenda, next item is public comment. Johnny, you say we have a few signed up. Please introduce them. Not hearing you.
I believe Johnny's muted if he's trying to talk.
Sorry, thank you for that. The first name that I see in the chat is Doreen Jessup. Doreen, you're self-muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. My name is Doreen Jessup. I live in Seminole Heights, and I believe that it is very important to preserve and connect the vibrant neighborhoods of Tampa's urban core. I oppose further I-275 retention wall intrusions along the eastern boundary of Tampa Heights. I understand a motion to strike Amendment 8 and 9 of the TIP has been circulated among you. I incorporate that motion by reference and support it fully. Striking these two amendments would protect Tampa Heights and its designated historic district from further structural intrusion and damage at the hands of FDOT. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Next comment?
Okay, the next name I see is Lena Young Green. Lena, I'm unmuting you and you have to unmute yourself now.
Good morning. Thank you for another opportunity to share and to talk with you about our communities, our neighborhoods. Again, I am asking that you kindly support the motion that Rick Fernandez is intending to put forward to you all this morning. It involves the extension of the DOT's interstate wall into Tampa Heights, into our historic area. We only learned about this information more recently, and it is a concern, major concern for us in Tampa Heights. And I ask that you kindly support the motion that Rick Fernandez intends to put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Johnny?
Okay, see a couple others. Matt Suarez is on, but it looks like his connection is coming in and out. It says he's offline at the moment, so I can bypass him for now. And the next name is Mauricio Rosas. And Mauricio, you can unmute yourself. Okay, if Mauricio's not there, the next name I see is Nicole Perry. It looks like her connection is also coming in and out, so we'll bypass her. And the next is Tim Keyports. Tim, you're unmuted on my end.
Good morning, CAC. This is Tim Keyports. Can you hear me okay?
You are getting an echo.
Okay, sorry about that. I had a hard time connecting this morning. I appreciate you allowing me to speak this morning. I actually had intended to give my 3 minutes to Mauricio, so I'm not quite sure if he's going to be able to come online, but the short version will be that we fully support the neighborhood of Tampa Heights. I'm the president of the Old Seminole Heights Neighborhood Association, and we have been longtime advocates of the urban core and never have supported the expansion of I-275. We do appreciate FDOT's in a challenging position, and the sound wall movement in Tampa Heights and eventually the sound walls that will be put up in our neighborhood of Seminole Heights are of great concern. The biggest challenge in our specific area is recognition of the historic district and the frustration of FDOT continuing to engage with the citizenry. Specifically, we were looking for the medallion treatment on the sound walls, similar to what is seen right now in Ybor. And as I understand it, will be going up in West Shore. We've been told continuously that we missed the window of public input, which is beyond me since the walls are not even up at this point. So we would request again that FDOT be asked to engage with the citizenry in a collegial manner so that we can have our voices heard. We're also very concerned about the landscape, which we understand will be a separate contract. And while I understand that, in the past, there's never been money at the end of the build out. So we never get the landscape that we're promised. So we were told in the past, landscape would be put at the end of all the streets that dead end into 275. If you drive through the neighborhood today, you'll see that there are still no trees at the end of each of those streets that dead into 275. That was promised during the last expansion. So again, fully support Rick Fernandez, and I will give any of my remaining time either to Mauricio Rosas or Rick Fernandez. Thank you.
Yeah. Johnny, have we got any of the others back?
Yes, I see Matt Suarez has resolved his connection problems, so I'm going to go to him and then we'll make our way back through the list. Matt, you can unmute yourself. All right, he might be struggling. The next on the list is Mauricio Rosas. Mauricio, you can unmute yourself.
Good morning. I'm Mauricio Rosas. I'm the chair, volunteer chair of the Old Seminole Heights Neighborhood Association Byways and Highways Committee. First of all, let me just say that we completely support Tampa Heights. We completely support the upcoming vote that Rick is going to be proposing, his resolution. I want to emphasize that it's what's going on in Tampa Heights. It's not just Tampa Heights. It's also going on north of MLK. MLK is getting a vertical wall. Chelsea is not getting a vertical wall. Osborne is also not getting a vertical wall. Though Osborne is part of the historic area, it should have the same treatment as it does on Hillsborough Avenue, but it does not. It has a completely different treatment. The same thing with the bricks, the wall. We were told that we had to have special conditions for the red bricked walls, and the condition was historical area. Well, it is in a historical area, and that entire segment should be uniform, just as it is in Ybor City, just as it is in West Shore, just as it is in West Tampa. At the moment, the uniformity is not there. Also, I want to remind everyone that FDOT has told us that they're just in the procurement stage. Yes, just in the procurement stage. So we can still have a meeting with FDOT and other community leaders so that we can rectify what's going on in the Tampa Heights area, and then also look at the same thing on what's happening north of MLK. As Tim Keyport stated, we're talking about the medallions, we're talking about the reconnectivity of the area. We cannot have reconnectivity if we continue to build upon this highway. The wider the highway, the more cars, the faster the speed, the more accidents that we have. That's something that the MPO has stated clearly. FDOT has even made that same statement, that the faster the cars, the more accidents we have. Congestion is actually a friend and not an opponent to crashes. The one clear way of reducing crashes, reducing fatalities, is to reduce the number of cars on the road. We have no other alternative if we truly want to reach a vision zero.
Excuse me, Chair, that's 3 minutes.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio, for your comments. Johnny, anyone else in the queue?
Yes, Chair. Starting from the top of the list, and then we'll make our way down again, is Adrienne Rodriguez. Adrienne, I've unmuted you. You can unmute yourself.
Adrienne, you're right.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Adrienne Rodriguez. I am a fourth generation Tampanian. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I didn't have time to sit down and write or put anything together, so I just want to speak from the heart. My great-grandparents and grandparents settled in Ybor City and lived there for decades with Italians and Spaniards. They were a very close-knit community. That neighborhood is now I-4 westbound. It was very sad when they were pretty much forced to sell their homes. But now we see history repeats itself. And with the expansion of the interstate, there will be traffic. With traffic comes pollution, car crashes. I now see a beautiful historic neighborhood of neighbors that have lived together for decades, fighting to be able to hold on to their neighborhoods, to be able to raise their children and their families, and to be able to live in a safe environment, free of pollution, free of the fear of a car careening into their home by a drunk driver, as we've seen many times with neighborhoods that run along interstates. I also would like to add that every time the citizens of Tampa Heights has had more than their share of problems in the last few years, not only with the destruction of this Lamar home, the expansion of the interstate, but just last week, many citizens of Tampa Heights went to city council meeting in defense of saving Woodlawn Cemetery. Fortunately, Woodlawn Cemetery was saved. But I think that what needs to be done is in the best interest of the citizens of Tampa, of the taxpayers. And at the risk of sounding rude, these taxpayers are the people that pay your paychecks. The government works for us. And so with that said, some things are better left untouched. I don't want to see another neighborhood destroyed as they did to my great-grandparents and my grandparents in the late 50s to build I-4. So I'm just imploring you to do the right thing by the citizens of the Tampa Heights and the citizens of Tampa in general. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. At this point, Julie, if there are any others signed up for public comment, I'd like to put a pause on public comment. It is 9:15. I'd like to recognize Beth Alden, who's joined us here in the room. We're going to have a presentation on members' interest regarding legal recourse at the DOT. But before I start that, let me acknowledge that Christina Acosta has joined us in the room and is present. Christine, welcome.
Good morning.
Beth, you're recognized. Go ahead.
Good morning, committee members. Thank you so much. I'm here with Cameron Clark, who is the TPO attorney, and we understand that you all have some questions about what are the TPO's options at this point under the state law in particular. And so really, we're just here to answer the questions that you have.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome, Cameron. I think this issue was brought by one of our committee members. Cameron, you want to make any opening comments before we open it up for questions?
There's spikes in the ceiling, so you should be able to speak from anywhere.
That's okay. Thank you. So no, I don't have a presentation. I'm just happy to take any questions. To my view of the statute, legal recourse of the TPO is very limited. I mean, it's a planning organization. It doesn't really function as a government body or anything like that. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. I saw some via email, but rather than going point by point through the emails, the numerous emails I received, I'm just happy to take any questions that the members may have. It's a little warm in here, so I take this off.
Certainly may, yeah. Other questions specifically from the committee? I think Coy brought this issue to the committee. I'll give it first shot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So, and Beth, chime in please if this is appropriate for you to answer. So the general gist that I get is that the TPO has essentially approval authority for items in the TIP. And if the TPO removes something from the TIP, that means that that particular portion of the project, the DOT project, does not go forward, correct?
So one of the things to understand is what is in the TIP. So for example, the TIP doesn't say there will be a noise wall at a particular location. It doesn't say that there's going to be landscaping at a particular location unless there's a separate project. What the TIP is going to describe, there's going to be a line item that says the project is located the following spot, typically on a road, from one endpoint to another endpoint. There's going to be some work. There's a very brief description of the work, typically like a sentence. There is a cost estimate for that. There is a funding source. The funding is in a particular fiscal year. The fiscal years start on July 1 and on June 30th. And there's a phase. And the typical phases that we see in the TIP are for PD&E, preliminary engineering, which is shown as PE typically, right-of-way acquisition, ROW, and construction, CST. There's some other phase codes that are used by the DOT. Those are the frequent ones. All of this is consistent with the State Transportation Improvement Program. All of this is so that there can be a clear communication with the federal government about what the federal funds are being used for. So when we talk about what is it that the TPO has a decision-making role with, we're talking about those pieces of information.
Okay, so on a broad level, like what's going to happen today, if the TPO were to remove line items 8 and 9 from the TIP, then FDOT would not be able to proceed forward on those portions of the project, correct?
They would specifically not be able to use federal funds.
Okay, so it's just federal funds, but in terms of state funds, they
Yeah,
can.
Mr. Prindle, let me add that too. Just
Okay.
so I'm gonna do this constantly. I do this all the time. I say MPO still all the time, and I gotta stop doing it. So on the statute, it's still called MPO, but I know we're not the only TPO. But its primary function is, I mean, some of the history of this stuff, it's been discussed numerous times in public comment. You think like the 1960s, you think of, oh gosh, what was the guy's name up in New York?
Moses.
Yes, who bulldozed whole neighborhoods. Point of an MPO is it was created to allow for local input for these large sort of federal projects, which obviously didn't exist before. And so the primary function of MPO is really threefold. The two major ones, the minor one, which I'll just leave out, is just as the UPWP, which is just a budget, but the long-range transportation plan, which is just unfunded, feasible projects, almost kind of like a wish list, and then the TIP. For TIP is funded projects. In order to be on the TIP, you have to first be on the LRTP. You can't have something on the TIP that's not on the LRTP. You can have plenty of stuff on the LRTP that's not on the TIP. But yes, as Beth just stated, if something's taken off the TIP, or frankly taken off the LRTP and the TIP, it just wouldn't be eligible for federal funding. It doesn't really speak to state or local funding. It's just federal funding.
Okay, so theoretically, they could still move forward with the project using just state funding, even if federal funds are gone.
Theoretically.
Okay. So does the TPO have any like authority to bring a lawsuit against anyone? Forget FDOT. I mean, you're obviously familiar with Florida law and the Florida Constitution. I mean,
and I know, and obviously, you're an attorney as well. I can tell you the MPO statute is, first of all, we have federal law, which doesn't speak to this sort of thing at all. The federal MPO statute is incredibly vague. A lot of states, although not all, actually create their own state statutes to address MPOs. We have the ability to file suits is not listed among an MPO's powers and authorities. And just by contrast, now, doesn't mean the MPO can try, but just by contrast, for instance, TARTA is expressly authorized to file lawsuits under its statute, under its enabling statute. I'd also point out that in discussion with the general counsel for the MPOAC, who has been,
Advisory Council.
who has been their general counsel for almost 30 years, he has never heard of an instance of an MPO filing a lawsuit against anybody. He can only think of, I think, 2 instances where the MPO has been sued, and one of them is ours regarding surtax, and even that, he really was the MPO was included was because it was eligible for disbursements under the surtax. So the history of this sort of thing is, to me, I think it's a real uphill climb to the MPO could somehow file suit. The likely court cause of action would be if the MPO, TPO, was to remove an item from the TIP that was past what I routinely just call a point of no return,
the MPO could presumably be sued by the department for breaching the statutory constraint, but the way to address this, to my way of thinking, the only way that the board could change its mind would be if it's not past the final return, or if the department agrees to make some sort of change. But like it just, so the short answer is I'm not aware of anything under the enabling statute that allows them to file suit against the state.
Are you aware of any boards of county commissioners that have sued the Department of Transportation related to?
No. There's some sort of case law that a political subdivision of the state can't sue the state, but I'd have to double check that. I'm not sure about that.
Okay, I'll yield for now. Thank you.
Rick Fernandez recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Cameron Haight, good morning. One of the emails that you referred to at the top of your chat with us was one I assume that I circulated to you through Johnny Wong, setting out a number of specific questions. The point of that was to try to save time here so we wouldn't have to go through these questions in the 30 minutes that we have, and try to give you a little bit of a heads up as to what was coming. So I got to say, I'm a little disappointed that you're deferring on this completely, but
Rick, you're free to ask all those questions one by one.
Not in 30 minutes,
I'm not just going to pitch
but
you out one by one.
But that said,
Go ahead.
in 30 minutes, there's a limited amount of stuff we can cover, and our public comment has already been deferred in order to allow this. So let me ask you this. One of the things that I had Johnny circulate were the transcripts of your presentation to the TPO board in June of 2020 and in June of 2021. Those are the two meetings that I was able to find after hours of searching transcripts. I guess I have no life, where you actually addressed the question of the point of no return statute. The earliest was 2020. In June of 2021, Commissioner Overman was toying with the idea, and in fact made the motion to strike the portion of the downtown interchange project, the lane movement that was westbound I-4 to northbound 275. That is one of the 3 lane movements in the DTI now. And the question was raised at that meeting as to whether or not that lane movement, and in fact the DTI project as a whole, was beyond the point of no return. And this invited what I thought, when I first looked at this, was the first foray into that statute in front of the board. I later found out that wasn't true. But during that meeting, you commented to Commissioner Overman and to the board at large that the statute was very ambiguous, the terms were not well defined, and that in fact what Commissioner Overman wanted to do, which was strike that lane movement from the tip, you couldn't say definitively whether that was something she could or could not do. Is that still your, looking back on it retrospectively, would that still be your advice to her? Because we have a motion of this sort pending in front of this committee, or we will. And so my question is there anything about this statute that definitively tells us what we can or cannot do vis-a-vis these items on the tip in the DTI?
No, because the provisions that you're speaking about aren't defined terms in the statute. It's always very helpful in a statute to define imperative terms, but in this instance, the statute doesn't define it. The language you're referring to is that projects included in the tip that have been advanced to the design stage or preliminary engineering may be removed from or rescheduled in a subsequent tip only by the joint action of the MPO and the department. So it doesn't say anything about amendment or stripping parts out of something that's at that stage in the tip. I would say that I think there's at least a common sense argument that the idea of stripping parts out of something is without further analysis. I mean, obviously these are engineering projects. Simply stripping out a lane here without having the department have a chance to look at what effect that has on the entire project, whatever simulations they run beyond my comprehension, is concerning. But the statute doesn't expressly speak to it. I needed the board to be aware of the fact that this is in there. I remember briefing Commissioner Miller on this as far back as 2015 or 2016. But it's not helpful that these aren't defined terms. The design, stage of building engineering, I know that in my work with the county, I've relatively often worked with public works, and terms like that are really terms of art in the sort of the transportation engineering field and construction of large projects like this, but the statute doesn't define it.
May I follow?
Go ahead.
Thank you. And if anybody has a question burning in their soul, please raise their hand. I don't want to take all of this time, but I do have questions. One of the problems.
Excuse me, Chair, Nikki Rice has her hand raised. I don't know if it's pertaining to this particular question.
Sorry, who has a hand raised?
It was Nikki.
Okay, let me ask my question and then I'll step back.
We'll recognize Nikki in a moment. Thank you.
All right. One of the problems I have, among many, is that this statute has been elevated as a shield to oppose any effort being made to try to remove something from the tip. We have heard on numerous occasions, either coming from staff or coming from David Gwynn, that once something has gone into the design phase, it cannot be removed from the tip, period. Might as well have come down from the mountain
Without the consent of the department.
without the consent of the department. But when that very issue was raised in 2021, your counsel was, well, that's not as clear as it might appear. But it still gets raised.
That's not what I said. Her motion, yes, was not as crystal clear because she was making a motion to amend something that was in the tip, not to remove it or to postpone it. She wanted to take a part of the project out.
Right. She wanted to
speak to that.
She wanted to remove a lane movement.
Right. That's part of the larger adopted project.
Correct. Which is exactly the same thing that I'm asking for in the motion that I circulated among the group.
And what I'm saying is, the statute doesn't really speak to that. It doesn't say amend a project in the tip. It's not unlikely that, obviously, if the department asks for a change to it, then they're consenting to it, the MPO can do it or not. But as far as the MPO asking for a change for something in the project, the statute doesn't express. Okay. That. And in answer to
This is a point of information.
Yeah, go ahead.
That the downtown interchange project has been separated into 3 separate projects. So there is one project for the southbound to eastbound. There's one project for the westbound and northbound movement. There's one project for the westbound and southbound. So to get rid of any of them, you would have to strike.
Right. Okay.
Right. And also, in answer to your question that you did ask before, that provision, that subsection D of that part in the statute's been in there for at least 20 years. Try to go back further than that just to see the legislative intent of that provision. But it was in there as far back as 99. And I'd have to dig further to see if I can find the original adoption of it. It was in the statute originally.
Yeah, I tracked it to 97.
Preliminarily, at least, I would speculate the reason it's in there is because once a project reaches that stage, there's been enough public dollars spent on it that it would be potentially a disservice just to basically pull the rug out from the project, because at that point it's reached a stage of investment where there may be public reliance or the department's state reliance on the fact that they're going to be able to complete a project. That's purely speculation. I know the NPOIC General Counsel speculated the same thing, but that's all we have. Literally, we're talking about one sentence in the statute. No defined terms.
Okay. All right, I'll defer.
Just for a quick point of
Nicole Rice is recognized online. Nicole, go ahead, Nikki.
Okay, good morning. First and foremost, I've been reading all these emails. I've had many issues with the format we use. It's not compatible well with Mac, which also helps, which also is not very great for public transparency. I'm seeing a lot of over here, a lot of over here. There was also a major issue that was brought forward in the transcripts in regards to clarification regarding tolls, which has been something that has been an ongoing misrepresentation from FDOT. So there's a lot of things here, and it's kind of disappointing that there's not direct answers to the direct questions that were laid out by Mr. Fernandez and Mr. Suarez. The fact that citizens have spent the amount of time that they have spent combing through these documents is first off to be highly commended. The question I would have in regard to legality, which is a little bit separate, is there any recourse as our board unfortunately has a makeup of voting members who do not have any kind of accountability to any form of citizens, nor are they electeds. You have people who are appointed who citizens cannot access from the port, the aviation authority, etc., that are making decisions on projects that benefit them directly, which lacks transparency. And quite frankly, my members' interest comes back around to this in the sense that it's fine for them to be there in advisory capacity, but to have a vote in regards to how our taxpayer funds are being allocated on a board that should be representing the citizens' voices is highly concerning, and I think something that is a legal matter. Is there any way that you could address that, please?
Is that a question for Mr. Chairman?
I can speak to it. So the MPOs, and just in terms of precedent, I'll say this is the coolest podium I've ever seen. It has a monitor on. I can actually see who's talking. I'm sorry, I digress. The HART board, for instance, is majority elected officials, but it has teams. The T-BART board, same thing. The MPO boards there are certain officials that have to be included in an MPO board, but federal and state law gives some discretion as to who may be on board. Obviously, county commissioners have to be represented. Cities with populations exceeding, I think the number is still 50,000, have to have representation. So for our board, certainly BOCC, county commissioners, City of Tampa Council have to be on there. Also, officials representing major modes of transportation. So I would say that HART certainly has to be on there. I think that there are also some options. For instance, our board, I would say at least statutory planning commission doesn't have to be on there. There's some argument as to some of the authorities. I know that some MPOs in the state don't have all the authorities on that we do, but certainly they can be on there at least. And I think our two smaller cities, last I looked, Plant City and Temple Terrace, are below the population threshold to require a seat, but they certainly can have a seat. The point is just that the statute allows for some degree of discretion as to membership on an MPO board, but it's also uniformly, especially like the one looking at the transportation boards, HART and T-BART, uniformly they have at least some members on there.
And I don't mean to interrupt you. I understand how the board is made up. We understand on this committee how the board is made up. There's also the understanding of how we got to the position where the change that was made allowing voting authority by certain entities that normally would not have voting authority, which has been incredibly damaging to projects here locally. So my question to you from a legal perspective, when you look at the framework laid out under federal guidelines for MPOs, we can call it TPO all you want, but looking at MPOs, under the federal guidelines, do we have any kind of recourse in regards to the fact that these votes on these major projects are being handled or overthrowing the will of the people by these entities that are not accessible? I cannot call the aviation authority or port authority and meet directly with them as a citizen. They are not accountable to me. So is there any legal recourse in regards to this? The makeup of the board and the mistake that was made years ago that needs to be re-engineered out, where they are only there in a capacity to advise.
Sure.
Of that, if we look at that, because I know that we're going to be looked at for our funding on whether or not we have Title VI compliance, and I think this shows that we do not. So yes. I'm very concerned about that, and I would like to know from a legal perspective if this could be something that could be re-engineered back to where it should be, and does it give recourse on this project, considering that all those electeds are overshadowed by those who benefit?
Yes.
And I'll stop at this point so we can move forward.
The answer is yes, that after each census, each decennial census, MPOs are redesignated or reapportioned. That's a process by which it's determined the membership of each board. It's areas of local governments that's affected by population. And I believe that process is going to be started in the near future for the most recent census.
What can we do to move that forward, and how can we utilize that in this manner?
Thank you, Nikki. Let me come back to that. I think Josh Frank had a question.
Got it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few quick questions. I think it's important, you mentioned that, in my recollection, is that Commissioner Overman's motion was to strike specific line items from the TIP, not an amendment to a line item.
She wasn't removing an entire part of the adopted TIP by striking a part. If I take an ordinance that's adopted and I strike 5 lines from it, I'm amending it.
Even if the project itself is separated into specific items within the TIP. So item 8, 9, 10, 11.
But I think what, like as Beth was describing, it's broken down into 3. She wasn't removing an entire part of one of these 3 portions. She was making changes to portions of one of the portions. It's like if there's 3 slices of pie, she's not taking out one of the slices of pie. She's just slicing out a little tiny sliver of one of the slices.
I got you.
That's the ambiguity.
I got you. And that's my recollection was she was trying to remove certain line items entirely, but I may be misremembering that. So that was my first clarification or question. My second question is, I know that there's certain buckets that DOT brings items to the TIP in, PD&E, PE, that sort of thing. When it comes to a design build project, that seems to be a much grayer area, as you could argue a design build project is always in design. That's the benefit of doing a design build, right? It keeps costs down, you're designing it as you're building it. So how are we, and how is the TPO board to decipher that little line of statute for a project that is always in design? So in theory, when it's added, there's no taking it off the second it's added by the board because it's in design from day one. That's a bit of concern to me because, essentially it's a blank check because as a design build is very fluid, right? It can change from the first day to the 1000th day of design and construction. So if it gets approved on day 1 and added to the TIP as a design build, it can't be taken off because it's already in the design phase that second. How can we then have any authority or oversight or ability to then take it off without the DOT agreeing to that at the same time?
And I think that that's a good question. The fact of the matter is that, as I read it to you from the statute, the design phase of planning is really more of it's kind of like standard project speak rather than design build project speak. Right. So, and since the statute doesn't interpret it, and since the TPO doesn't manage the project, we're really reliant on the way the department interprets these items.
Right.
Is there an equivalent stage of a design build that's sort of the equivalent stage of a design of engineering? I mean, that's a good question. I can say that if it is to that phase, then we've got an instruction in the statute. But again, you're talking about one sentence of a statute that doesn't really contemplate that.
Right.
So then you have to sort of look at what's the intent of it, what does it mean? And I think it's a good question. It's not one really that Beth or I can really speak to definitively because we're not operating the project.
Right. And so, go ahead.
So just a couple of things to add on to that, just from someone who's maybe a little bit closer to watching the project development process. You'll hear from the DOT that design will even start in the PE phase. Because during that PE phase, you're looking at some different options. And so you have to do at least a little bit of design work to figure out what the options are, how they can fit, what we think some of the ballpark impacts are going to be, and then help the community make a decision about which of the options is best. That might get you to like a 30% level of design. And this is just stuff that I've heard engineers say at meetings. Then the next step after that would be typically in a TIP would be a phase that's labeled preliminary engineering, which sort of matches up with the statute that says design phase of preliminary engineering. And so that's what, like Cameron has been asking me for years. Can't we start flagging the projects that are getting to that design phase of preliminary engineering. And we've been a little reluctant to do that because he says we're not managing the projects and it's not super clear how you make that judgment call. But at the very least, if a project advances out of that P&E phase, there's a locally preferred alternative selected. And then there's a following phase in the TIP that gets approved and funded. Potentially, that project has hit that statute. Now, can I swear that it has? I can't. All I can tell you is that from the decision-making that the MPO does, that project may have hit that phase. There might not be any additional MPO board decisions about that project. It'll just proceed from there. So that PD&E phase is very important.
Sure. So I'll just conclude, you know, with a statement. I think as part of this conversation, that right there in and of itself is a major red flag to me. That there is so much, you know, wiggle room and gray area for what could be determined design. You just mentioned design could be, you know, considered as part of a preliminary engineering phase. So in theory, or part of a PD&E phase. So there may be even instances where design is done before it's even added on the tip, and as soon as it's added on the tip, a project can never be removed. So that's a major issue because we come across projects like this where, you know, it's in design from day one, and then there's no recourse for the TPO to ever have any say to take it off without the DOT agreeing to it, which would require, I think, a lot of mountains to be moved in order for them to remove something. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you. Don Skelton, did you have a question?
I think Ed did.
Oh, Ed did.
Well,
Okay.
Ed,
you're recognized.
I just want to be on record that I had hoped that we'd have time while the attorney was here to address another subject, namely the sunshine statutes. And that likely isn't going to be the case, but I would like to know that sometime on this agenda, I'll have an opportunity to make a motion about that.
Let me come back to you if Kemper could stay. Christine, you're recognized.
Thank you. What I'm hearing is a lot of language that boils down to, we don't know. we just don't know, and that there's no precedent to answer the questions that we are posing right now of Mr. Clark. But I would like to ask, and I'm sure that it is not your intent. However, I am sensing a bit of a dismissiveness in your demeanor. A great number of hours of research and commitment are represented in our desire to have conversation with you. So I just would say that as a citizens who spend, you know, just a great deal of our personal time and energy to try to be prepared for and have high integrity and dutifully serve our community. You know, I just that's just a vibe that I'm sensing, and I want to share that. My question is there a legal responsibility that the Florida Department of Transportation or any others that are engaged in the process have for transparent and truth in the conveyance of the projects and of the details in the projects as they move through the process?
I'm not a lawyer for FDOT, so I can't, as far as their enabling statutes and what their responsibilities are, I can't speak to those. As to the first thing that you said, I honestly feel like I'm addressing these things in a calm, cool manner. I'm sorry if you're taking what I'm saying to be really short. I have my own personal feelings about this. I live closer to that interstate than almost anybody who speaks in opposition to it, except for Rick. Okay. So I have my own feelings about this, but I don't say what my feelings are because my responsibility is to provide as best counsel as I can to the TPO board and to offer you guys as much information as I can what comes from the statute. So I apologize if anything I've said seems somehow short. I understand there's a lot of questions as well, and a limited amount of time because there's also Board of County Commission meeting today, and I have an agenda I need to monitor. So what I really want to do, and I know this gentleman as well, I'd be happy to take your sunshine question as well. I would like to be able to be here until you guys are finished with me, not have to rush out of the room. I don't want some kind of inconvenient exit like that. But as far as FDOT's responsibilities, and honestly, in all my years with the MPO, I've never seen FDOT bring a lawyer with them to any of the meetings. But I've never represented the department, and I'm not an expert on what their responsibilities are. I know for projects including the MPO, there are public participation requirements that MPO staff follows very closely. But if DOT has their own transparency requirements, they can't really speak to those. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Let me take one more question real quickly, and then I'd like to get back to Ed's question if we can. Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mr. Clark. I'm hearing from a lot of the CAC members' frustration over the lack of clarity on what the rules are, which feels very reasonable. What would be the process to get more clarity?
Well, truly the best possible outcome would be to get an attorney general opinion. There's literally no case law on the MPO statute. And just for whatever else that means, there's never been any litigation in court over the MPO statute and the entire time it's been on the books. And the MPOs federally has existed since, I think, the 1970s. So we've never had litigation on state statute governing MPOs, ever. There are numerous attorney general opinions, none of them on the subject matter that we're speaking about. And even when the AG offers an advisory opinion, it's not binding, it's more just counseling on what is or is not possible, what is or is not likely. The frustrating part, and I agree with you about the clarity portion, is that the legal field, you're really, one of my kids asked me what it is that I do, and the truth of the matter is it's about definitions, how words are defined. That's the best thing that I could come up with, because the most useless thing in the world is a regulation that says what you can or can't do, but doesn't define the terms that's regulated, because that leaves ambiguity, that leaves room for lawsuits. And then, courts are constrained by reasonable interpretations of words or basically common usage dictionary definitions of terms. In language like this, design phase of preliminary engineering, I would imagine it's going to be something along the lines of the sort of term of art that transportation engineering people use, because that's not really a common term. I don't walk around using that phrase every day. It's really a term of art for that profession. It is frustrating. There's a lack of clarity. Really, the best that you can do is to, unfortunately, listen to your council of lawyers, but there's only so much that they can do when you have undefined terms. The most official way that MPO statutes have been sort of narrowed down in terms of what certain things mean is attorney general opinions, and the statute at least has a few of those, but there's no cases. And this part that we're talking about doesn't have AG opinions or case law.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Let me impose upon you to allow Mr. Wojcicki to ask his question about sunshine, if we may.
I would just ask if you could give us, sort of the 2-minute version of what the intention of sunshine is. And when he finishes that, if it's possible, I would like to, at some time in this agenda, introduce a motion related to that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark.
So the purpose of the sunshine law is that when there is something, when there's an action that's going to be voted upon, that the correspondence, the discussion between the people that are going to be voting on it be in a publicly noticed setting, so that members of the general public could, if they wish, attend and watch. They can sometimes involve public comment. With things like workshops don't generally include public comment, but people can still attend and watch them to simply see where it's all coming from. This all goes back to sort of the doing away with the smoke-filled rooms where deals get made and nobody knows what's behind them. And in the context of what you were talking about with emails, it's just that there can't be an email stating a position on something and then another member replies to it, because then that becomes a discussion. That's something that has to be in a publicly noticed setting.
So that means that one person has a megaphone and can broadcast out, and all the listeners have duct tape over their mouths. Is that correct?
As to the listeners having duct tape over their mouths, yes, that's true. I did see an Attorney General opinion that really strongly discourages the practice of one member just sending thing after thing after thing about positions, because those are things that ought to be articulated in the public setting. But that AG opinion didn't prohibit it, it just strongly discouraged it. What is prohibited is any response from another member of the Sunshine Body to that.
So if somebody responds, is that person in violation, but the person who initially sent something out isn't in violation?
Technically speaking, yes.
Well, I didn't hear the answer. The answer is yes.
I'd say technically speaking, the person responding is starting the discussion. I suppose that both can be charged with violations of the Sunshine Law, but I've never seen an instance of that. Again, that this is also something where there's no case on it. This is based on one Attorney General opinion from, I think, the aughts, I think it was. Sure.
Yeah. Real quickly, Rick. Yes.
Yeah, just, and what I anticipate is one of Ed's primary concerns, the circulation of the motion to strike the 2 tip amendments that went out on Friday of last week. I just want to be clear that that circulation went out after Johnny Wong sought counsel from Mr. Clark as to whether or not there was any concern regarding the violation of Sunshine. And according to advice of counsel at that point, Johnny was cleared to send it out.
I advised Johnny, and it's not uncommon, even meetings with elected officials, if there's going to be an item brought by an elected official, sometimes they'll submit an addendum into the record just describing the background as to what they're going to propose. I think the thing I was reading, it was more about the volume of things that come rather than just, so Johnny submitted that item after talking to me as an addendum to the agenda. Yeah. And so that way members can be prepared, hey, this is going to be discussed at the meeting.
That was my intent.
So,
yeah.
And just to clarify that, following Mr. Majerski's question, if that sort of addendum or proposed action is circulated, it's not proper. What I'm hearing you say is it's not proper then for committee members to respond and begin a dialogue about that matter.
Correct. In an area I think where you have to be cautious is obviously with social media day today with things like Facebook and Twitter. If a member of a board or committee posts something on a subject that may come before them, to my way of thinking, if another member of the committee even likes the comment, that violates the Sunshine Law because you're saying, I agree with you. That needs to be in a publicly noticed setting. There should be no commenting on it. There should be no, I like that or anything like that. It should be, that discussion should happen here. Someone who's posting comments like that shouldn't even know what anybody else on the board thinks about what they're saying until they're in this setting.
Okay. All right. Do you have time for another question or two?
Sure.
Stephen.
All right, Mr. Clark, a quick one. With sunshine laws, I've never understood, or you can clarify for me, we're allowed to meet, we're allowed to be together and hang out and
sure.
Get a drink, get dinner. We're not allowed to discuss issues that are coming that might be coming up for vote.
Yes.
And that's just sort of, there's like a little gray area there, and like we have common interests. We like transportation, we like talking about how to build awesome communities, and sometimes political views or like the way we see the world can come out in those conversations. Any sort of like thoughts on this topic?
I don't think political views really haven't. I mean, people vote, so talking about political views, I don't think that's an issue. Transportation, if you're literally on the same board that needs to discuss about transportation, then you should not talk about transportation with other members if what you're talking about. I mean, if you're saying, I like to ride my bike, that's transportation related, but that's fine. But if it's something that could come before your agenda, then you shouldn't discuss that with that person. You can hang out with them and talk about it. People can be roommates and be on the same board. They just can't talk about the items that are going to come before the common board.
You have a question?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mr. Clark, my recollection from the statute is there's a distinction between a knowing or willful violation of the Sunshine Law and inadvertent.
Oh, sure.
Violation. Sure.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that, FDLE, I'm sorry, I was a prosecutor so long, I forgot what they're called. Not they're going to show up and arrest somebody or something like that. I'm just saying it's something to be cautioned against.
Well, I just point that out because, and this is not to make a point to Ed specifically, but there's a lot of chatter getting thrown around about people violating the sunshine law. And I think it needs to be pointed out that there is a distinction between people that go around and willfully violate it and people that, because of the lack of clarity and everything else, are engaging in inadvertent violations of the sunshine law. The other question I had for you was with regards to political candidates. Is it my understanding that candidates running for office, there is a certain exemption for them to be able to discuss matters that might come before?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't expecting that question today. I can look, there may be, but I'll have to check that. I wasn't right. I know that there are, I have seen some stuff about office candidates, but I'd have to refresh my recollection on that.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Clark, thank you for coming. I think that there are probably a number of other questions that people would like to ask, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So.
Well, I mean, honestly, if anybody has anything else, I'm still here. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take
any further questions. Let me just pose a possibility. What I heard you say had to do with the Attorney General's office. And I'm interpreting that to mean that it might be possible for this committee to recommend that the TPO seek an AG opinion regarding how to interface with the FDOT as projects move along during the various stages. Is that something you would, if not recommend, encourage?
Oh, really anybody can ask for an AG opinion. I don't know if I'd make a recommendation one way or another. My point is just that without case law, we have to rely on AG opinions. And I have seen instances, like obviously there have been questions about the MPO statute that have been made to the Attorney General's office, because that's the only reference source that makes reference to the statute. So there have been numerous instances where that's happened. Whether I recommend it, really that's at the discretion of the board, or frankly, we've even had instances of local government bodies ask that question about MPOs when they have membership, but that's at their discretion.
Okay, thank you. Josh?
Just one quick question, since you're still here and volunteering your time. Thank you, by the way. Is to follow up on something that Ms. Rice asked, and you answered about the census, coming up and the changes to the TPO board, or evaluation for potential changes coming up soon. What does that process look like? Who does it? How are we able to, as citizens or as the board, be engaged in that process?
Well, I can tell you from a statutory standpoint what it says, the handful of sentences that they ever used. But honestly, I came to service in the MPO, I think it was 2015. So after they finished the last one, I think Beth could probably speak in terms of day-to-day operations, how it worked. Beth might be able to speak to that better than I could.
Sure. So there is a membership apportionment plan that's prepared by staff with the board's direction. We've already heard from the board members that they are interested in looking at some different voting options. You knocked out some of the questions that were asked this week. And so what will happen first is we'll bring back to the policy committee some different voting options and seek their direction. Ultimately, the membership apportionment plan has to be approved by Hillsborough County and by the city of Tampa. Historically, we've asked for approval from all of the departments. And then we would be submitting that to the governor's office, which also must approve it.
And I'll tell you too, and this is just my own speculation, but just based on population changes the last decade, it wouldn't really surprise me if you end up getting all 7 Hillsborough County commissioners on the next one, just because the growth in Hillsborough County has been proportionally larger than the growth in the cities.
Right. So
just speculation.
I guess, my counter speculation would be that, I think what Ms. Rice was talking about was some of the appointed but not elected officials that don't have constituents, don't have to, hold an office or have aides or anybody that can communicate with anybody. So
no, I understood that to be the case. I think it's likely, for instance, that HART, I'd be very shocked if HART didn't still have a member. Sure, they really should. And HART does have some appointees, and the HART board could appoint one one of their appointees to be, and they have in the past.
But I guess my question is, for somebody like, let's just say the port, right? The Port Authority has a voting member on the TPO board. As part of this apportionment, if say it recommends either keeping a member from the port that perhaps it's not voting, or taking that member off completely, whatever the end result may be, where they're no longer on the board, that's the recommendation. That has to be approved by the county, cities, and then eventually the governor. But does that ever also go before the TPO board itself? Does that have to get approved by that board to then take that representative off? Like, I'm wondering, it seems pretty easy to add members. It seems rather difficult or perhaps onerous to take members off or change their vote.
Possibly. We added, a few years back, we added a school board member.
Right.
And that was a relatively simple process. We didn't need to do a lot to make that happen. No members have been taken off the board since I've been here. And I'm not sure precedent-wise we've ever had removed members from the board or not, but it certainly predates at least my time here. I think what Beth is saying is that the TPO board basically sends out what they would like their makeup to be. But the point is the TPO board doesn't have the ability to veto the counties, cities, and then the governor's office. Essentially, they're not the deciding vote on what their makeup is.
Sure. So if the governor disagrees, if it makes its way out of there and that ends up being not you get a red line through it, does it come back and maybe start the process over again? Is it revert back to what it was?
I would speculate probably yes, because the governor does have to sign off on it, and which means there'd have to be changes made at the ground before it comes back up again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, when we recognize that, Nikki.
Thank you. So, Mr. Clark, I take it that members of this committee are not considered public officers for the purposes of the Sunshine Statute?
This is a volunteer board. It is subject to Sunshine, though, certainly because it makes recommendations to the board.
Well, I guess why I'm asking is because if one were to look at the penalties, right, there are penalties for public officers, including fines or misdemeanor charges, those kind of things, but that wouldn't apply to members of this board because they're not public officers.
Sure. Usually, Sunshine violations are curable, which is to say, if two members of the same board discuss something, then they, first of all, don't. But second of all, if that happens, the content of that needs to be fully disclosed to the body so that it's now in Sunshine, essentially. It seems disingenuous to say like, oh, every meeting, so me and a member, we discuss things in every meeting and say, oh, we talked about this, now disclose it, it's cured. I think it's meant just to point out that, especially in situations like this, when you have non-lawyer volunteer boards, I respect the office of some lawyers, but it's not supposed to be a club to bash people with for making mistakes. It is intended, though, to try to ensure that relevant discussions that are going to then be used to form recommendations that are then going to be used to send to the full MPO board, that those discussions, that the rationale behind those recommendations is fully in front of everybody so that people can see what's behind it.
And is it not true that one of the cures is essentially that if there was a vote on something and it was later learned that there was a violation, that it could be a revote?
Yes.
Okay.
Nicole Rice, you have a question?
I'm going to I just need us to move forward and get things accomplished today. But when you said there is no one of these entities has, these veto powers, that's a pretty lucid use of that word. It takes one member to veto. You're right, there is no veto, but there is the actual totality of the votes. And if you were to remove the votes of the interests that are going to vote with FDOT's plans no matter what because of their funding, which are, we know exactly which agencies up there receive that funding, you would not have the current situation or conversation that we are having right now. So it does matter
And they are not just stakeholders, they are beneficiaries of tax funding and are going to vote in line. I also would like to, just so that we can move forward, say that it is clear that we're not going to get clear definitions on sunshine law. However, I do know from the past there is no precedent whatsoever of any person serving in the capacity as a citizen who does not have voting control being sued under sunshine law. So we can move past that. And it is clear that there was, this is not addressing the actual concerns that were put forth that were very clear. So I would like to move that we proceed on to the next agenda item. I would like to make a motion that we proceed to the next agenda item.
Mr. Chair, this is Terrence. I'd like to be recognized, please.
Yes, Chair. Any other questions of Mr. Clark while he's here?
Just
one more real quickly, John.
10 seconds. All I want to say is this was extremely helpful, and I think it'd be beneficial for the entire board. And Mr. Clark, if you're willing to come back regularly, semi-regularly, to answer questions that we may have that arise from every few months or so of the business. I think this was very helpful.
I work in the building. I can come back anytime you need to.
It's a great suggestion. We'll invite you back in the future. Thank you for your time.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
Terrence Trott wanted to be recognized.
I just had one quick question, please. Thank you. Good morning. Is there any barrier to a new TIP amendment being proposed that makes it impossible to execute an existing TIP amendment?
I've never heard of such a thing, but it sounds to me that if you have something that's in the TIP that's, let's just say for argument's sake, it's past the point of return. If you have something in the TIP that's past the point of return, and then the subsequent amendment that makes it impossible to do that, to me, that would be tantamount to removing it. So I'll admit I've never heard of such a thing, but it seems like if it has the effect of doing the thing that's prohibited by statute, then it violates the statute.
Thank you.
I would expect it.
Point of information.
Yes, Nikki.
I do believe that wouldn't Beth or the direct employees here, wouldn't they be able to actually submit what he was requesting into the TIP, because you make TIP adjustments constantly? So wouldn't the answer actually be yes to Terrence's? That was Terrence's question, correct?
Yes.
Correct, that was my question.
Okay, so wouldn't Beth and the employees here at the TPO have the capacity to do what he's requesting?
I honestly don't know what he's requesting. TIP is.
No, I don't have a specific, sorry, to be clear, I don't have a specific proposal. What I'm just saying is, if one were to be made where the result is it's physically impossible to do the existing TIP amendment, is there anything that prohibits that?
What that sounds like, I mean, think of this in almost Robert's Rules context. If there's a motion that's made, and then someone says, I'd like to amend the motion, and the amendment literally contradicts the first motion, that's not an amended motion, that's a substitute motion. You literally, it's like a hostile substitute motion. It's not the same. So to me, all I'm saying is, and I apologize, I probably shouldn't engage in a hypothetical, but if it's an adopted amendment, if it's an adopted TIP section, and subsequently something else is adopted in a way that makes it impossible. Let's say you adopt an intersection improvement, and then subsequently you do another one that really changes the entire nature of the intersection. You've made it impossible to do both things. I would just say if the first one's past the point of return, that's tantamount to removing it. And so you might fall in line, you might have a problem with that language in the statute. But again, I apologize, it's a hypothetical, so I don't want you to rely too much on that. I need to step down from the clouds for a moment.
Right, and I didn't want to give any proposal, just the basic framework, the premise. It seems like it should not be impossible to do.
Chair, if I can address that a little bit, I think I can speak to Terrence and Nikki's comments. John Wong and I manage the TIP. Our team goes through some efforts to ensure that projects have consistency with one another. And so if there were two projects that were diametrically opposed or had competing goals, we would definitely flag those and bring them to the attention of the implementing agencies. And then regarding Nikki's proposal or I guess, rhetorical question about whether or not MPO staff could initiate a tip amendment that would prevent a project from moving forward. It's really not the TPO's responsibility, or it's not our mission to introduce projects into the tip. Since we're not an implementing agency and we don't construct the projects, we would not be soliciting a tip amendment for our own tip for a project that we wouldn't have any role in managing. So I think that's kind of where Nikki was going. If I'm mistaken, I'd be happy for her to correct me later.
Thank you, Johnny. Rick Fernandez, go ahead.
Very quick. I made a reference at Cameron's beginning comments to an email that I circulated to him with several questions. I have asked Johnny to circulate that email to the entire CAC since it's been discussed, and I've asked some questions from it today. So if you see something that hits your screen today or tomorrow, that's what that is. Also, I had made the suggestion, and I think Josh is kind of my preamble. This is very helpful. What is clear to me is that there's a lot of stuff that's not clear. And what's scary to me is that the lack of clarity doesn't begin and end here. It also exists at the board. They don't know what the hell they're doing either on some of this stuff. And that is very scary when they're people's homes that are at risk. So what I'm suggesting is that this would be an ideal topic for a workshop that would include not just us, but the board members and other advisory committee members, so that we can get into this in something other than a 20-minute cycle and actually begin to ask some of the hard questions. I'll reiterate that suggestion as a matter of record that I've made in an email. But I hope that will be considered, and then we can get to it in fairly short order, since we've got some significant board meetings coming up in the next few months, not the least of which is the tip review in June. All right, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Clark?
If you need me again, just let me know.
You want to add anything before we close out
The
this
thing I would
discussion?
like to add is pay attention to PD zones. Because that's where we have an opportunity to make a difference.
Absolutely.
When it's still at that preliminary level.
All right. Thank you both for coming and taking the extra time to address the committee. I'd like to move back on our agenda to public comment. Johnny, are there any persons waiting in the wings?
Yes, Chair. Mauricio, or I'm sorry, not Mauricio. Matt Suarez was patiently waiting. It looks like he logged off. In addition to the commenters attending the meeting today, I received a couple of emails. Well, I received several emails, and a couple of them were requests to actually read their comments into the record. So let me pull those up right now. And while I do that, I will also say that according to my clock, we're about 30 minutes behind. I think that we might have an opportunity to make some of that time up. But you'll give me just 1 second to find the emails. All right, the first one is from Clive Hahn. It says, my name is Clive Hahn. My family and I moved into the Tampa Heights neighborhood in late 2018. We live at 2824 North Elmore Ave, directly adjacent to the 275 West border wall. Prior to moving into the area, the possibility of moving the border wall was never communicated to any of the Tampa Heights community. The current pile driving construction being performed on the east side of 275 has literally shook our house on the west side. I can only imagine the feeling and pollution it will cause when it's literally next to our front yard. I oppose further I-275 retention wall intrusions along the eastern boundary of Tampa Heights. I also oppose any construction being performed on the western boundary of Tampa Heights. I understand a motion to strike amendments 8 and 9 of the TIP has been circulated among you. I incorporate that motion by reference and support it fully. Striking those 2 amendments would protect Tampa Heights and its designated historic district from further structural intrusion and damage at the hands of FDOT. Second email that I received is from Connie Rose. says, my name is Constance Rose. I moved into the Tampa Heights Designated Historic District in 2011. It's actually the exact same text as the previous email, but she resides at 2906 North Elmore Ave. And she is writing that she also supports the motion to strike tip amendment, or to strike from the tip 8 and 9, and that she opposes further I-275 retention wall intrusions along the eastern boundary. And those are all the email comments that I received, and I think we covered everyone in the chat, Chair, so I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Johnny. With that, we will close this portion of the public comment on our agenda. We will move into any remaining members' interest. If the members might like to bring up, reminding you this is a point at which we like to discuss items for future meetings rather than discussing specific items. Anyone have a member's interest item to bring up? Clerk Grindle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to get a report either from the city, it may involve the city or FDOT, in terms of some of the downtown signal timing and how the city or FDOT is going about setting those particular parameters. As I mentioned briefly at a previous meeting, I think some of the light sequences are not set up to encourage or make it easy for people to walk downtown. There's a lot of stopping at each block, and so that's something I'd like to get a little more information on, if maybe Johnny could procure that information.
Okay, good suggestion. Josh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is maybe just a follow-up and a little bit more homework for Johnny. A few TPO CAC meetings ago, I asked for some status updates and reports on roadway jurisdiction, who controls what, where, creating a map of that sort of information, as well as crash data related to jurisdiction. So which agencies have the most crash-prone corridors, for example. Johnny was so helpful enough to send that information to me in email, so staff was able to put that together. But I think it'd be worth spending some time to show and discuss with the whole board the findings of those and some of the trends. Johnny, if you might, put a small presentation together that sort of talks about exactly what you've mapped, that would be really helpful. I think these are, as long as I can remember the first time I've seen this information in one place. So I think that'd be of interest to the board. Thank you.
Okay, good suggestion. Rick Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. Despite some of the comments that were made during public comment, I don't necessarily share the confidence of some of those friends and neighbors about our being able to reach the motion to strike the 2 tip amendments that I filed or that I circulated through Johnny last week. If we can get to them today as part of this agenda and new business, great, but if not, I would implore staff and the chair, please, to include that motion to strike as one of our action items in the agenda for our next meeting, so that everyone on this committee would have ample time to review it, and hopefully we will have a good turnout and be able to discuss it at length. I also circulated a motion to provide guidance to the chair with regards to reports to the TPO board. That motion was circulated to everyone. I would hope to get to that today as well, but if not, I would ask that that also be added as an agenda item for our next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Lloyd?
Mr. Chair, given I think some of the discussion about the tip amendments specifically in the discussion with Mr. Clark, I would submit a motion that we move the discussion regarding the tip amendments and Mr. Fernandez's motion up specifically to just after the approval of the minutes, so that we can ensure that discussion occurs.
I would second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to move that discussion of the tip amendment motions up to preceding our action items following the minutes review on the agenda. Is there discussion on the motions? Everyone understand? We have a motion and a second. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Bill Roberts,
Yes.
Rick Fernandez,
Yes.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Hoyt Prindle,
Yes.
Christina Bosworth,
Yes.
Miaza Morrison,
Yes.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Yes.
Nicole Rice,
Yes.
Alexis Boback is online, but she does not have a microphone, I don't think. Alexis Boback, do you see your mic on? Your vote?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christina Costa,
Yes.
Artie Fryer,
Yes.
Nicholas Glover,
Yes, hopefully you can hear me.
got it. Don Skelton,
Yes.
Ed Marszewski,
Yes.
Sharon Gamond,
Yes.
Terrence Trott,
Yes.
Rick Richmond,
Yes.
Joshua Frank.
Yes.
The motion passes 18-0.
All right, thank you very much. Ed, you're recognized.
Yeah, I'd like to also ask that, I'd like to make a motion sometime during this agenda related to the sunshine, whether it's following Rick's agenda items somewhere before we adjourn.
Okay. Are you,
Hold on.
I think that was a second, but are you suggesting that we might follow the change in the agenda, discussion of the two tip amendments with your opportunity for a motion?
Yes.
Is that acceptable, whatever you want? Is there any objection to bringing that item up out of order? Christina, go.
I just have a question. How are we doing on the rest of our agenda? And is it, Mr. Marszewski, is that something that you would not be comfortable putting on our next agenda item for next month?
Right, it is something I'd be uncomfortable not having on our next agenda item.
Okay.
And I think, I don't want to speak for Ed, but I think that having followed the discussion with the attorney here is probably makes it very timely. Josh?
Yes, I would just suggest that we are in members' interest, and if you were to make the motion now and it were to not succeed for lack of a second, that would be rather indicative of what the conversation might be at any point in time during this meeting. So I would suggest maybe just go for it now and see where it lands, and if it doesn't, go for it, then we'll leave it there.
Well, I think he has made a motion to place this item on the agenda early in the agenda today. I think there is a second. If the committee doesn't object, let's take a voice vote on that.
Can we get a name of who was the second? I wasn't quite sure who that was.
Yes. Who made the second?
I'm not entirely sure it was the second.
If there wasn't a second, I'll say.
Okay.
For the record, Don Skelton second. All right. I'll accept a voice vote to move this item onto the agenda. All in favor in the room, please say aye.
Aye.
Any in the room opposed? All those online in favor, please say aye.
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 Any online opposed?
Aye.
Any online opposed? All right, we'll move this item up also following the approval of minutes. I'd like to move then now to the item 5 on the agenda, which is the updates to the minutes of the December and the January meetings. Johnny, I'm not sure who's going to actually handle this discussion if there is one.
Yes, Chair. I will just quickly give you a summary of some of the requests that we received from the last meeting. If you remember, when we were at the minutes portion of the February meeting, there were a number of requested changes and clarifications for both the December 2021 and January 2022 minutes. Just to keep it very brief, I believe that we addressed all of the requested clarifications for the December minutes. One of the things that was requested to clarify was what the actual motion was regarding some tip amendments that came before you. We clarified those in the committee report, but just to summarize them here, the vote was 8-1 in favor of approving the TIP amendments, except for those pertaining to adding auxiliary lanes on I-4 and I-275, with the provision that pedestrian crossings on Southdale Mabry be designed to also accommodate cyclists. So that was very clear in the committee reports. It wasn't clarified in the minutes because it was never stated as clearly in the meeting minutes, but just to confirm that it was conveyed to the board exactly as was requested. The other clarification for the December minutes is that I believe Vice Chair Fernandez asked for the state of the system report to be updated regarding some air quality measures and then presented at a later time. I did do that at the February meeting, so we addressed it that way. Regarding the January minutes, Christina Costa requested a clarification of her statement that, quote, when speeds are set too high, it's the responsibility of owners and operators to correct them. We did make that change, and Gail Reese, our recording secretary, among other responsibilities, actually included the timestamp for the meeting in the minutes to refer to. There were a number of requested clarifications and changes from Vice Chair Fernandez. One is that the design build project was beginning in 2022. The minutes from January stated that it was 2023. It was clear to us, having reviewed the recording, that Vice Chair actually misstated it. He did say 2023 initially. We all know that he meant 2022, so we made that change in the minutes. The second one is that there was a sentence referring to Lamar House, and the word not was used instead of now. We made that correction in the minutes. There was a statement or a sentence ending with, quote, like when TB Next was introduced. It was clear that upon reviewing the recording that it was TBX. So we made that change. And then lastly, Chair Roberts requested that we change the word resolution to motions. So we did make that change, and pending all of those changes and clarifications, the motion was to approve the meeting minutes for December and January. So I think we're good, unless there are any questions about the changes that we made.
Are there any questions from the committee about these changes to the December and January minutes? If not, yes, Mr. Fidel.
Just an anecdotal. It warms the cockles of my heart, Johnny, to know that you folks on staff know when I've made a mistake and what it is I actually intended to say. So thank you so much.
So noted. Any comments on that? I don't believe this item requires a vote. We will accept the changes and corrections to the minutes as were requested at the last meeting. The next item on the agenda has to do with the minutes of the February 2nd meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Mr. Fernandez.
I'll move to approve, but there is an error.
Let's get a motion and then we'll take comment.
Okay. Move to approve.
Second, a motion to approve.
Second.
Josh Frank makes second. Discussion, Mr. Fernandez.
Okay, just real quick one. On page 7 of the document, it's in unfinished business. Next, or the third to the last line, it says it was further noted that questions would be asked of the attorney around title Roman numeral 4. It should have been title Roman numeral 6.
Okay. Other comments or discussion on the amendment on the minutes of the February 2nd meeting? Anyone online have any discussion on this item? I can't see everyone, so I'll ask you to speak up if you do. With that correction, I'll take a voice vote on the approval of the minutes of the February 2nd meeting. All the committee members in the room in favor of the motion to approve as corrected, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone in the room opposed? All the members online in favor of the motion to approve the February 2nd minutes, please say aye.
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 Any members online opposed? Motion is passed. Thank you very much. Now we'll move into the special order of business, which is the consideration recognition of Mr. Fernandez for purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Chair. I guess for procedural purposes, we'll make a motion now to strike 2 tip amendments regarding the downtown interchange safety and operations improvements, specifically amendment number 8, which relates to the lane movement westbound I-4 to southbound I-275, and amendment number 9, which relates to lane movement I-275 southbound to I-4 eastbound. That particular lane movement is generally referred to as the flyover ramp. The motion is more specifically and in much more detail identified in the motion to strike and the supporting memorandum that was circulated to the committee on Friday.
We have a motion to strike 2 tip amendments. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, who made the second?
Josh.
Josh Frank made the second. Discussion on the motion to strike these 2 tip amendments.
Chair, if I may intervene, I think it would be better for the purposes of public engagement and potentially moving this recommendation forward to the board to rephrase it to initiate a tip amendment at a later date. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the terminology motion to strike tip amendments because for this to move forward, it would have to get approval from the TPO board to bring it back as a tip amendment at the earliest being April. Since we have public notice requirements specifically for tip amendments, we wouldn't be able to fulfill our public engagement requirements if this were to move forward with the language today. So what I'm trying to suggest, if Vice Chair will accept it, is to reframe this and say, propose to the board to initiate 2 tip amendments rather than using the phrase motion to strike.
Are you proposing that those could be voted on at the next meeting and not at this meeting? I'm unclear on your guidance, John.
I'm suggesting that the motion be rephrased. So rather than using the term motion to strike tip amendments, I think it would be better to phrase this as propose to the TPO board to initiate a tip amendment to strike amendments 8 and 9. Because again, we wouldn't be able to notice this properly in time for the TAC to vote on it. It hasn't been noticed properly for the CAC. In order for this to move forward, the earliest that the TPO board could consider actually striking those amendments would be April.
All right, I think I understand your suggestion. Mr. Fernandez, is that acceptable to you?
Well, I wish I fully understood it. I wasn't necessarily pushing for this to be addressed today. I thank my colleague for making that motion during member interest. Johnny, I wish you'd mentioned this before we walked in here today. I might have been able to respond more intelligently. State one more time in what fashion you would like me to reframe it, please.
Just to be clear, Vice Chair, I don't think that this changes the content of what you're suggesting. I think it's clear to everyone that the goal of this motion is to remove amendments 8 and 9 and the movements that you described. I just want to specifically state that for us to initiate a tip amendment, I think that we still have to fulfill our requirements for public engagement, one of those being a window of opportunity for the public to comment on it. And if this were to move forward today, we wouldn't have enough time for the public to comment on it before it gets to the board. So, you know.
So in what style would you prefer that I dictate this motion into the record?
I think that the proposal should be for the TPO board to initiate a TIP amendment to strike. Because once they initiate it at the March meeting, we would have enough time to fulfill our requirements, and then they could vote on it in April if they choose to do so.
All right, so I'll take a shot at this, Chair, if you will allow me to restate the motion. All right, on suggestion of MPO, TPO staff, I will retitle the motion to motion to initiate TIP amendments to strike downtown interchange safety and operational improvements. The balance of my original introductory comment would remain the same. Is that sufficient for your purposes, eye in the sky?
Yes, I think that that's perfect. Thank you.
Well,
Josh, is that acceptable to you?
Yes,
Is your
second. Yes, second.
Motion's been rephrased and the second's been reaffirmed. Is there a discussion on the intent to move this as a recommendation to the TPO board to amend the TIP?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, I'm sympathetic to certainly to the concerns of the Tampa Heights community, and I certainly would urge DOT to do anything they can to, you know, whether it's landscaping or designing wall, you know, putting designs in the walls or anything like that. But ultimately, I'm very concerned about the safety implications of what's out there now. I mean, anybody who rides 275 south during heavy periods, you'll know that that right turn over to I-4 backs up sometimes past MLK. And in addition to that, there's enough people jamming up the adjacent lane, trying to get in at the last minute. And it just is a dangerous situation in my view. And so I'm definitely going to vote opposed to this, albeit I'm sympathetic to a lot of the concerns of the Tampa Heights community. But I think from a safety point of view, you know, we've got high crash rates there, and I just make that statement.
It has been reported there are 1,000 crashes a year caused by that design. Any other discussions? Josh Frank.
Yes, just, you know, I think we could debate the merits of whether or not these improvements or these line items are justified. I could easily say that we're now doubling the amount of cars that are going through this interchange, and therefore it would be reasonable to expect those crashes to double as well. So, you know, the merits of these improvements or changes is something we could debate. I think the motion here in front of us is more about the process and perhaps impropriety that was brought before the Tampa Heights community and the board and us as well. You know, I strongly believe in that after reading this and hearing Rick in the past few meetings that there were communication issues, perhaps intentional, that led to folks being misled into what they thought they were approving. And so I think that is more or less the heart of this motion, is to rectify that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Other comments? Committee members in the room? Christine.
Yes, I have a question before I can vote on this. I need to know that something came up when Chairman Clark was speaking, and he said something that funding could be impacted by this, that we could lose the federal funding for that. And I really need clarification on that before I can vote yea or nay on this. I would hate to lose the federal funding completely.
I can make a stab at it, or I'll ask Hoyt if he would like to make a stab at addressing the question of how federal funding might be impacted by such a move.
Well, and
Not to put you on the spot.
Well, and Josh might want to chime in on this too. My understanding from Mr. Clark's presentation was that what the TIP controls is the ability of federal funds to go into some specific line items of this project. So if one of those items was removed from the TIP, then those federal funds would not be able to be used on that particular line item of the project. I don't understand it to mean that those federal funds disappear forever. Maybe someone else would have a different perspective on that. But as I understand it, it just means that the federal funds can't be used for that specific line item, and it has no control over the state funding that is used for the particular line item.
That would be my takeaway from this presentation. Does that help you?
Yes, it does.
All right. Other discussion, Mr. Fernandez?
Just, Christina, specifically to your inquiry. I hope that if nothing else came clear through Cameron's presentation is that there is a lot of uncertainty about all of this, but there is at least some precedent out there, fairly recent, that maybe you have to read a little bit between the lines, but dating back to 2021, the event that I referenced, Commissioner Overman was toying with the idea and toyed to the point of actually making a motion that she later withdrew. She made a motion to remove one of the lane movements that are incorporated in the downtown interchange. I'm talking about two other lane movements. This is the third lane movement that Commissioner Overman was talking about last year. And that was the lane movement westbound I-4 and northbound 275. And all I can say to you, and this was captured in the transcript that was circulated that hopefully you had a chance to read, was that there was never a question raised in that moment, not by Council Clark or by MPO staff or by anyone else on the board regarding the possibility of funds being lost if Commissioner Overman were to go forward with that motion. She ultimately withdrew the motion because there was a great deal of uncertainty, and I don't think she knew what to do, so she withdrew it. But if there was ever going to be a time when that particular question would have been addressed as a matter of concern, I would have thought it might have been raised then, and it wasn't. I don't have anything to add to what Hoyt just said. Frankly, the funding being lost or not lost has always been a bit of a boogaboo to me, because it's always being thrown out there as a threat. But that being said, that gives you at least some guidepost dating back to, I think that was June of 2021, so within the last year. Maybe more important because of what wasn't said rather than what was said, if that helps at all. Probably doesn't. I do have some comments.
I'll come back to you.
Sure, please.
Discussion from committee members online on this motion, and then I'll go to Mr. Fernandez. Hoyt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to echo, I think, for a second, some comments that Josh made with regards to, I feel like, and we spend a lot of time on this committee. We spend a lot of time going through projects. I certainly don't do it as well as Rick does, but in the 5-6 years I've been paying attention to this, there seems to be kind of a constant problem with FDOT just kind of figuring out what they need to say about a project to get the project approved. And then after the fact, we have this leakage and backtracking, and then we find out all this stuff that's going on that was not really disclosed up front. I find that to be infinitely frustrating. I can't imagine how frustrating it is for somebody like Rick or Mr. Clark or others who live in the neighborhood where this is directly affecting their livelihood. As we pointed out, we have very limited options about how we can effectuate change with FDOT. One of the only ways it seems to be that we can effectuate change is to remove items from the TIP. And frankly, my personal opinion is that, too often the TPO has been a rubber stamp for what FDOT needs to do, and FDOT is just time and time again has been able to change projects and do things that are harmful to the community, specifically this community, without recourse. So the only recourse we have is to remove these items from the tip, and so that's why I'm going to vote in favor of this, not because I don't think we can't maybe figure out some kind of solution that, fixing the, ruining the neighborhoods, but this is one of the most vibrant neighborhoods in the entire metropolitan area. And for some reason, we seem to have a State Department of Transportation in Tallahassee that ignores what's going on in the rest of the country, where they're, tearing out freeways downtown or trying to invest more in downtown areas so they're vibrant. And we keep taking land off the rolls in downtown. We keep encroaching further into the neighborhood. It's completely dumbfounding to me that we're doing that here with all of the revitalization in Tampa Heights and Seminole Heights and elsewhere. So, I'm not going to say I can't ever get back to a place where, we can find that this project can work somehow, but I don't have any faith in FDOT's current leadership. Certainly Mr. Gwynn's actions regarding the historic building at the Lamar kind of helped cement that for me. And so with that said, I'm going to vote no on this, and I think other committee members should, because I think it's time that the TPO assert that it is not a rubber stamp, that it is not just some useless organization that is here for show because of something that happened 50 years ago, but is actually a important and vibrant piece of citizen input that can effectuate transportation.
Stuff. I don't see that. To me, it seems like the information has been there.
Thank you. Let me just comment on what Boyd and Josh have said without speaking directly to the motion. I think this demonstrates and illustrates clearly for this committee the need for us to spend time and focus when the TIP amendments come to us prior to the June presentation at the TPO board. If in fact there is information contained in those presentations or information missing, we have that opportunity, and I think we would be well advised this year to take even more of an in-depth look than we did last year. And last year was certainly more concentrated than we had done. I just wanted to make that editorial comment. Are there other comments, Josh?
Just to follow up on that, I would completely agree and say that I would hope that CAC members and board members would view the TIP as a gate, with a mindset of the things that come before us need to prove that they're worthy of making it to the TIP, as opposed to we need to find something or make sure there's nothing worth taking them off the TIP. Because as we've heard, there's no real legal guidance as to what is designed and what is not. So in theory, something could be on the TIP day one and no longer have any recourse to be removed. So I think it's a framework or a lens of being seen as, no for all of these things until they prove yes, as opposed to yes until they're proven to have something that is worthy of taking them off, so that we're not put in this position. As Wade said, there are other TPO boards and other TPO board CACs that use their TIP in this fashion. It's very difficult to get projects on. They have to have well fleshed out and well engaged community plans before they are ever brought to the CAC board or the TPO board for approval. We don't do that. We get things on and ask for forgiveness later, which is a real onerous, burden to be placed on this board and us as, community citizens, activists, folks that are interested in this. So I would just echo that and say that we should really be paying attention to these and coming at them from the mindset of they need to prove their worth as opposed to the other way around.
Thank you. Other discussion on the motion, Christine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I plan to vote in favor of the motion, but I wanted to say that I appreciate your encouragement, Mr. Chair, on taking the tip very seriously, and let's double down on getting into it. But I also would say, to Josh's point earlier, in a design build environment, what we approve to advance on the tip is not always what comes to fruition in the final results of any given project. And without disrespect to Secretary Gwen, I would say that he said at the last TPO board meeting that FDOT, and I'm paraphrasing here, but FDOT, we have our own language. I'm sorry if you don't understand our language, or something like that. Well, it is I consider it our role as CAC members to decipher that language, or urge that a special language not be allowed, and really step out on that limb and say, this sounds like this may be a stupid question, but, and really really insist upon clarity and ensure that we do understand the details even after a project has made it through the TIP approval. There's just much more information that comes after that. And so I wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Other comments? Other discussion on the motion? Mr. Fernandez, I'm sorry.
Nikki Rice.
Someone.
We have an online comment.
We have an online comment, but I can't see who it is. Nicole Rice.
I apologize. Yeah, okay, thank you. Ultimately, I think that in what Josh and Christine are saying is, here we are sitting here today on this board. I've sat in this board for many years. And the ability to even comprehend with an attorney in the room and advisors the scope of how this operates is problematic. And it's imperative that we take a stand, because that's ultimately, like Josh said, all we can do. So we're not going to change what FDOT is going to do, but it's imperative that we represent the will of the citizens that we represent. I represent the city of Tampa. This impacts the city of Tampa, but it also impacts projects across the board, this language and this misrepresentation of the phasing of projects. I'm sure there are many people who are very concerned with Big Bend, different adjustments to I-4. So at this point, if anything, just as a board that has spent hours and hours of countless time with zero compensation or benefit besides trying to do right by communities, it's imperative that we make some kind of stand. And right now, this is the stand we have. Whether or not it changes policies, or we could fight induced demand, we could do this for hours. But it's really important that we kind of show the board and the state that we prioritize the needs of our own region over their planning. And that's really what this comes down to. Does FDOT and the state determine our future, or do we as citizens determine we get a project that's costing billions of dollars? To be clear, we are only spending from the state $500 million to mitigate flooding and environmental change in South Florida. So we are spending a huge swath of money to add flyover lanes to an interstate that never, and according to Gwen, in the last year at the hearing, does not fix the bottleneck. So I think we can do better. I know we can do better. And I'm just encouraging everyone on this board to understand that this is the only recourse that we have at this point, and where we go from here, we'll find out. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Stephen, and I'll give Rick one chance to close. Yes.
At first, I just want to say, Rick, how impressive it is, all the work you put in more work than the rest of CAC combined. And you've been doing it for over 10 years. But I'd also like to get some we have an FDOT representative on the line. I'd like to hear from the FDOT representative, if they're Amber, if you're able to, if you're privy on these topics. There's two parts of this discussion. It feels one is this project and what it does for the county and whether or not it makes sense. And so I'd like to hear just what FDOT thinks the benefits are and why this is a good project. It's been a while since I've heard an argument for this project. And so I think it would be helpful for the CAC to hear that. And then second, there's this other part of the conversation that is, was there miscommunication in a nefarious way? Was this done in a way that, warrants further discussion? And from my understanding, FDOT said they would not take more land in the Seminole Heights community, Tampa Heights community, and or they said they wouldn't encroach. And I'm not sure, did FDOT then take more land, or are they just adjusting a design to build on land that they already?
Is there someone online from FDOT that would care to address Mr. Hollenkamp's question?
Yes. This is Kirk Bogan with Florida Department of Transportation. I'm the environmental management engineer here at District 7.
Thank you.
Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, the concepts that have been shown today have not changed since we presented them at the public hearing for the SEIS back in 2020, and I think we rolled it out in 2019. And so they have not moved. We've always said that we will be within our existing right-of-way and the Tampa Heights side. And so the wall has not changed.
Thank you.
And then Kurt, could you also, do you have it may be too complex to state in a paragraph, but what the point is, why FDOT thinks this is a good thing for the county, for the state, these two items that we're discussing, taking off of the tip?
Well, I think what I've heard for this is there's a safety issue there in the downtown interchange that we're trying to correct for this operational improvement. It's not adding capacity, it's just trying to make sure that it operates more efficiently and safely so that we might be able to have a more safe facility without impacting buying right away in that community to, as you know, is really a downside from what was proposed earlier in 2017.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mark, one comment.
Just a question for the FDOT representative. Are there additional lanes being added as part of this interchange fix?
There are these improvements are operational. Of course, there's a lane being added to the bridge to help with the operations of the interchange. But by the time you get onto I-4, it's back down to one lane. But to help the traffic to get off of I-275 onto I-4 and to put them in the right lanes to get there from Hillsborough North, then it's imperative that we do these improvements.
I just don't understand the argument that you're adding a lane for operational use, which thereby adds capacity, which is why the operational use is better, but we're not adding capacity. Can you help clarify that for me so I can better understand you?
Well, operational is just that. You may have to have auxiliary lanes or some type of special lane to help with the flow of traffic, but it's not a through lane. There's no through lane added through the interchange. If you go south of the interchange, it's still the same number of lanes once you get out of the interchange area.
So your position is that as long as there's not a additional through lane, any additional lanes added as part of ramps or quote unquote auxiliary lanes do not add capacity?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
It has with the flow of traffic.
Rick, did you have some closing comments you wanted to make? Otherwise, I think we can ask for a vote.
I was just, if I may, just quickly, Mr. Bowden, is that also the case for what you're doing on the other item that's up for debate here, not just the flyover, but the westbound I-4 towards north I-275? Are you considering that operational and therefore not adding capacity as well?
That's correct.
Okay, that's news to me.
Rick, anything you want to add?
Well, yes. First of all, this may come as somewhat of a surprise to all of you, but my comments right now are going to be somewhat extemporaneous. Quite honestly, I didn't expect this to be teed up in quite this way, this early today. But here we are, so I'll take the opportunity as it is presented. And again, thank you. We're kind of reliving history here with the resolution that was presented in January. I didn't expect that one to move forward in January either, but it did. So here we are. First, and I guess I need to respond before I get into the motion itself to a couple of things that were said. Let me start with Ed and the testimonial about the credibility of Mr. Quinn. I would suggest that anyone who has not done it, and this is obviously not helpful for today's vote, but if you have not had an opportunity to do so, please review the YouTube video of last month TPO board meeting. That would be February 9 of 2022, which was about as close as one will ever get at a TPO board meeting to a trial of the Department of Transportation on these issues, complete with testimonial evidence and documentary evidence, and even a closing argument by yours truly. And closing comment by Commissioner Cohen, the chair of the TPO, that in light of everything he had heard over the previous hour and a half, it was quite clear to him that we had not had the best day for our community, referencing what had happened in all of this and the relationship between the DOT and Tampa Heights over the last 2 years. Has there been misrepresentation on the part of the Department of Transportation to the people of Tampa Heights? I would say no. What there has been have been lies. Misrepresentation is entirely too diplomatic. And it's ironic to me that one of the primary misrepresentors of fact just came here and spoke to you in the eye of the sky, Kurt Bogan, who told us at our meeting in January, the Tampa Heights Civic Association meeting, January 23 of 2020, that the people of Tampa Heights should expect no further right-of-way impact in Tampa Heights secondary to the downtown interchange projects. When specifically asked by a member of the community in that meeting if the footprint of the interstate would have to be expanded, neither Kurt Bogan, nor David Quinn, nor Ed McKinney, or Elaine Elish, all of whom were present in that meeting that day, picked up that very specific question and answered it. And said, what they said was, and this is through the mouth of Elaine Elish, what she said was, you have a greenway in Tampa Heights that acts as a buffer between the interstate and the community. And that greenway is going to stay as is. When I left that meeting that night, I was feeling pretty comfortable that we had avoided a big bullet in terms of structural intrusion into our neighborhood. It hurts me to have to say that about Elaine Elish, because quite frankly, I find her to be one of the most pure-hearted actors in this whole process. But she was speaking to us in DOT speak. I think she felt that she was communicating honestly, but in fact, what she was doing was communicating a false impression. Now, why do I say that what was said or not said at that meeting that night was a misrepresentation of fact, crossing the line over into deception? I say that because January 23 of 2020, they're sitting in our community parlor telling us that we're going to experience no further right-of-way impacts. And 3 weeks later, on February the 19th of 2020, they create a roll plot map. You folks have seen those. I've had them in this room when we were talking about the resolution. They create a roll plot map. And within that map is a call-out box with an annotation. That annotation says, noise wall to be relocated. It has an arrow to the wall. The wall is on Elmore, about 100 yards south of my house. So 3 weeks after they come to our community center and tell us you're going to experience no further impacts, they produce a roll plot that says exactly the opposite. Now, do they come back to us and talk to us about that? No, they do not. Never. Not in not in 2020, not in 2021. The first time I ever hear about a wall being relocated is when I'm having coffee with a couple of FDOT ladies on November the 17th of 2021, and we're talking about landscaping and walls being made more pretty. And during that conversation, one of the ladies, Mary Lou Godfrey, who's one of the prime spokespeople for DOT on this project, tells me, Rick, after the wall is moved, there will be room for landscaping. First time I ever heard the words, when the walls are moved. From that moment to this, I have thought about and done virtually nothing but try to dig us out of the informational hole that the Department of Transportation put us in over those 2 years, and trying to communicate the extent of that hole and misinformation, not only to this committee, which I hold in great regard because of what we've done in our work here over the years, but just as importantly to the TPO board, all of whom were totally ignorant of this. Not their fault, they were in the dark just like we were. November 17 to now, that has been the battle with the Department of Transportation. On February the 9th of 2022, at that TPO board meeting, all of this was brought to a head. And if it wasn't established then for anyone who cared to listen, I don't know what it would take, but clearly from my takeaway, it was established at that meeting by testimonial and documentary evidence that the Department of Transportation has in fact misrepresented their plans regarding Tampa Heights and the relocation of interstate retention walls. They've made that misrepresentation over a period of 2 years duration. They've made misrepresentations here at this committee. They've made misrepresentations at the board as well. And the single best slide of the whole event on February the 9th was one slide that was presented as part of the PowerPoint presentation. On that PowerPoint presentation was an embed of the roll plot that I mentioned earlier that was created on February the 19th of 2020. That's the roll plot that has the words noise wall to be relocated. Juxtaposed against that roll plot on the same PowerPoint slide was a listing of places where that roll plot information was presumably presented to the public as a matter of public notice. The problem is the dates didn't work out well. They're telling us that a roll plot that was created February the 19th of 2020 was shown to the Tampa Heights community January of 2020, a month before it was even created. And that's just one inconsistency. On that one PowerPoint slide, there were upwards of 7 or 8 misrepresentations of fact, meaning the information being alleged on that roll plot was not available to be presented at those community locations as shown on the juxtaposed image. Now that's dangerous for a whole lot of reasons, not the least of which is, I remember when David Gwynn, this highly credible individual, and Justin Hall, his wingman at the meeting in January, when that slide was actually presented, I remember comments being made by members of the board that they were glad to see that that information was being communicated to the community. Kim Overman made that comment, in fact. So the slide had its desired effect. It misrepresented and misled the members of the board into believing that the DOT had come with open hands and clean hands to the community and to the board. By February, that had been told as a lie. And
Chair.
I think, and I...
Yes,
Chair, if I may, I apologize. I'm not excited about attempting to chill this conversation, especially because I think it is very important, but just want to note that in the interest of time, maybe we wrap this up and revisit the proposal for the TPO board to initiate the TIP amendments. I will note that Mr. Fernandez has laid out all of this information very elegantly in a written statement that's been circulated to the committee and also presented it verbally at our previous meeting. And I don't think that this is the last time to visit this topic, especially if the motion moves forward. We will most certainly be discussing it next month. So just want to make that note. We're running about an hour behind by my clock.
All right. Well, I'm certainly, I have a watch.
If you can,
Sure.
I know you have a watch, and if you can wrap up with discussion on the motion rather than the circumstances, I would like to call for a vote.
Sure. And I hope everyone appreciates that it's very, very frustrating for me to hear misrepresentations of facts still being circulated in this room after all this time. To be coming from DOT, and I know Ed has good intention and he has relationships, but I imagine that not everybody in this room has seen the replay of that meeting in February. And if you weren't here sitting as a member of this committee in January, you didn't have the benefit of the resolution that was presented. So yes, indeed, these motions that are presented are in front of you right now are a logical extension, I believe, of the resolution that was presented and passed by this committee in January. It was passed by a vote of 8-6. Essentially, what this committee said was that we stand with the department, or with Tampa Heights, and we support their efforts to keep these walls from intruding. This is nothing more nor less than an extension of that, calling for actual action. At the end of the day, the goal is to keep those walls from being moved. And to Ed's point, and then I'll close. I'll finish. I'm done. I'm tired of this. On the question of, it's just let DOT do whatever they want on landscaping and the other. It's very important that we have this for safety. One, first of all, nothing has been established as a matter of fact that this is a safety improvement at all. I don't need to go there right now. But please understand that there is always the alternative. And one of the things we've been crying out for ever since these issues were first raised in November is that we were never made part of the conversation related to concept development. We have no discussion on the record or otherwise with DOT regarding alternative designs that may have a positive effect on operational safety that do not involve the movement of walls. We just jumped right to the plan that has the walls being relocated and Tampa Heights falling under asphalt and concrete again. So am I open to the idea that there may be something that the engineers over at McKinley Drive could do that would advance the cause of operational safety? Sure, bring it on, be creative, amaze us all. The point is that the path they chose was the path of least resistance, the lowest hanging fruit. We have right of way, let's make it let's make it fatter and add a lane. That's easy. You could do that in a morning over coffee and go to lunch. They need to come back and talk to us about what other things that they could do. And Stephen, they aren't talking about taking more of the existing right-of-way. They're talking about expanding the footprint within a right-of-way that already existed, because the right-of-way was pretty fat to begin with, secondary to the TBX acquisitions that were had in 2015 and even before. So this is about the current footprint of the interstate not being moved at all. What they want to do is move the footprint out further into the community, but within their existing right of way.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Anyone else have any discussion on the motion?
Here, Nikki has her hand raised.
Call Rice, you're recognized.
Am I recognized, Chairman?
Go ahead.
Okay. We obviously need to move forward with this vote. I want to, first and foremost, I want to thank Rick Fernandez and Suarez and the people who put endless amounts of time in laying this out clear. I hope everyone has read this. I would like to share just one thing before we vote. I'm sitting here doing hair currently, working, and have a real citizen sitting with me who, as they were hearing the explanation by the FDOT rep, was like, what is the point of that? What does that mean? Operational? You're going to add another lane so that they can get to the other side where there's not another lane so we can sit backed up? This doesn't even make sense. What does that even mean? So that is the reaction of somebody who is a taxpayer who doesn't even understand this and said, I can't even, she's like, I'm getting beyond frustrated just listening to this. So we need to remember that we need to speak for people. There's nobody in this town who does not understand that malfunction junction is a problem. So we can do better on this fix. All these fixes across the board can be better. This is the place for us to say that you need to answer things correctly without FDOT speak. And to have FDOT in this conversation right now, who yet again is using language like operational instead of adding lanes, regardless of where they're coming from, is confusing to the public. And it's imperative that we shine a light on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm going to close discussion on this item. I'd like to take a roll call vote. We have a motion and a second to make a recommendation to the TPO board regarding the removal of two TIP amendments.
Could we have a head count as to how many people are actually available on the roll call?
I don't think that's necessary. We have a quorum in the room. I'd like to have a vote. I'm happy to take it, but I would like to have a roll call vote. Clerk, if you would call the roll, please, we'll take a vote on the motion.
Bill Roberts,
No.
Rick Fernandez,
Yes.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
White Prindle,
Yes.
Christina Bosworth,
Yes.
Miaza Morrison,
Yes.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
No.
Nicole Rice,
Yes.
Alexis Boback,
Yes.
Christina Costa,
Yes.
Artie Fryer,
No.
Nicholas Glover, Don Skelton,
No.
Ed Mrzycki,
No.
Jonathan Knudsen,
No.
Sharon Gamond,
Yes.
Terrence Trott,
No.
Rick Richmond,
No.
Joshua Frank.
Yes.
I'm going to call for Nicholas Glover one more time. The motion passes 9-8.
All right.
I thought it was.
It's 10-8.
I counted 10.
I'm sorry, is my count incorrect?
Yes. It's 10-8.
10 yeses.
Want to review it? I'm not asking for another roll
Correct,
call.
yes, I'm sorry, yes, correct, yes. The motion does
passed.
pass 10-8, yes, correct.
10-8. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have we have another insertion in our agenda, and that is Mr. Majerski wanted to make a motion regarding sunshine, I believe.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to this effect. It is the policy of the CAC that communications between members related to CAC business, including verbal, email, or social media, be limited to our public meetings. Furthermore, that MPO staff will not act as a conduit for these communications.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Ron Skelton seconds the motion. Is there discussion? Mr. Majerski, you want?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, I fear what we've seen over the last month. The way I described it is one person puts something out there, sort of builds their whole case, and basically has a megaphone. Nobody else can speak out. And I just think that's pure wrong. I mean, I think, you know, we're inviting every one of us to take our favorite subject and start putting stuff out there that builds a case for something, and other people are left, you know, speechless because they can't speak, because they'll be committing a violation of, and I just think it's clearly out of the intent of the sunshine, albeit perhaps legal, but it's out of the intent of sunshine to have this going on.
Right, further discussion. Rick Fernandez.
Yeah, the Attorney General's opinions that are laid out in the Sunshine Law Manual, which is put out by an Attorney General who is Ashley Moody, who is somewhat right-leaning in her thoughts anyway, but the 2021 version of that manual makes it clear that the communications that we have had, some of which have been initiated by me, but we've had other communications in the past where individuals have submitted materials for circulation among members of the board. May have done something like that, Stephen, with your financial report on Plant City. I think there's been some communication by Josh Frank regarding the Boulevard project. There have probably been others. The point of it is nothing that we have done is illegal, not even close to it. And this motion essentially would intend to limit our rights of free speech to communicate information, which then would hopefully make what we do in this room more valuable. I generally feel that information is better than less information, and informed decisions are not made in a void. So I'm definitely not going to vote for this. And frankly, I think it's not only against public policy, but I think it's against the law as laid out, such as it is by the Attorney General.
Other discussion, Christine?
Yes, I for one feel that we have a tremendous amount of information to absorb as responsible committee members. And I am very much in favor of receiving information that is pertinent in advance. I must admit that I don't always have the opportunity to do a deep dive on every single link that we get on every single agenda. And so it is helpful to me, and I appreciate very much when there's opportunity to have more information rather than less. I would also say that as this, a matter of form, this committee and all TPO committees undergo an annual review of the sunshine laws to make sure that we're fresh and current and that we understand what the restrictions are, and that any person having information is free to put that out. And it's the back and forth dialogue or debating that we cannot engage in. and that's fine. So I will not be voting in favor of this motion. I feel that we're really up to date on sunshine laws. As new member committee members, we get the whatever you call the onboarding or the introduction, the why we're here and what our role is, and we get a big dose of sunshine constraints in that. Then we have our annual update, and we've just had another revisit now mid-year. So I feel that I'm confident in my knowledge and my ability to adhere to the sunshine law. Thank you.
So I sent this back to Johnny yesterday, and there was some concern that this might be turning into a discussion and violate the sunshine law. But one of the things I pointed out, and it's why it's among the reasons I'm not going to vote in favor of this motion, is this is no offense to Ed, but like even Cameron Clark, who probably knows more about the sunshine law than anybody in this room, maybe anybody in this building, can't tell you the answers to all of these questions because it's complicated. And there's not a lot, there's some case law, but there's not in totality case law. But even what Ed sent yesterday, for example, right, which comes from Attorney General Opinion 89-23, notes. However, a commissioner may send a written report to other commissioners on a subject that will be discussed at a public meeting without violating the sunshine law if prior to the meeting there is no interaction related to the report among the commissioners, and the report, which must be maintained as public record, is not being used as a substitute for action at a public meeting. So when I read that to say, okay, I mean, you're not a commissioner, but you're a CAC member. I'm sure you think similarly. You send a report, the report gets distributed. So long as we're not having discussion outside of the meeting on the report comes here, in this case, the motion, and we vote on it in a meeting, that's not a violation of the sunshine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think this committee should be trying to pretend it's the Attorney General or a state court and give opinions on the sunshine law. We have enough restrictions as is that we have to comply with this law. I don't think we need additional ones. And I would just say, to everyone, I think we need to be careful. Everyone here, I don't know of anybody in this room that is not trying to comply with the sunshine law. But I think we need to be careful about how we phrase this. I think we need to be careful about accusing people of violating the sunshine law. I think it's reasonable to question whether a sunshine law violation has occurred. That's why we have attorney and staff that can help resolve through those things. But like, I have a bar license, right? So if somebody says you violated the sunshine law, I mean, that could affect me in ways that it doesn't affect other people. So I take that, if I'm a little bit testy about it, I think that's my irritation is we're throwing out a lot of accusations and saying, oh, so-and-so violated the sunshine law, we need to do this. When I don't know that that's true. And so I appreciate the intent of Ed's motion, but I'm going to vote against it. And I would say to anybody, if there's a concern about, if somebody's not complying with the sunshine law, let's email Mr. Clark or let's bring Mr. Clark in and let's get guidance and let's follow his guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let me just make another comment. Actually, if we were sending out information, okay, we had 2 emails sent out that included explicit motions that were going to be brought up. They weren't actually on the agenda, by the way. And for me, there's a huge difference between maybe having the staff send background information on a topic and blasting out a intention to make a motion and having all your justification there, but don't anybody respond to that because you're going to be violating the sunshine. While the initiator apparently is not violating the sunshine, but if you respond to something, you're violating the sunshine. To me, that just is absurd.
Okay. Other comments from committee members online?
Yep, this is Terrence, if I could be recognized.
Terrence, you're recognized.
Yeah, I see both sides. It seems like I think we just need a policy update for the type of communication that can be sent out. I would just add that to the conversation. I think we just need a policy change for the type of communication that needs to be sent, that can be sent out.
Okay.
If it's not on the agenda, you know, some supporting information, I guess, can be, you know, I don't know. I don't know if we should solve this today. I think that's why it should be like a policy discussion, something we can agree on. And then we go forward within the construct of Sunshine for this committee.
Okay. Let me just comment what I heard from Attorney Cameron Clark. The dissemination of information from one committee member to the staff to the rest of the committee is not a violation in itself of the Sunshine Law. If those communications request or even imply a reaction back from other committee members, that begins to get into, at least point, the gray area and a potential violation. So I think, frankly, I think the intent of Mr. Matursky's motion is right on target. I think if committee members have things they want for the committee to consider, it is appropriate for them to send that to staff. And it's appropriate for staff to circulate. It is not appropriate, in my opinion, and from what I've heard from Mr. Cameron, for those to come up and be voted or take an action taken on them without public notice and an opportunity for the public to come. That was my takeaway from his explanation. Not a legal interpretation, Lloyd, from a practical matter. That's my interpretation of how he requested this committee to operate. Josh, Frank?
Just, Mr. Chair, in the interest of maintaining an in-person forum, can we perhaps move this conversation along and then also get to the action items? Just
be happy to.
We're about 2 hours over at this
I
point.
know, we're gonna, I'm gonna, in discussion here, Stephen, I'm sorry, I know there's probably discussion that people want to have online. I think it's appropriate for us to go ahead and vote on the motion. So I'm gonna ask the secretary to call the roll on Mr. Majersky's motion.
Mr. Chair, can we have it restated, please, the motion?
Okay, the motion is, it is the policy of the CAC that communications between members related to CAC business, including verbal, email, or social media, be limited to our public meetings. Furthermore, that MPO staff will not act as a conduit of these communications.
Right. Now I'll ask the secretary to call the roll.
Bill Roberts,
Yes.
Rick Fernandez,
No.
Carolyn Brown,
No.
Hoyt Prindle,
No.
Christina Bosworth,
No.
Miaza Morrison,
No.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
No.
Nicole Rice,
No to censorship.
Alexis Boback,
No.
Christina Costa,
No.
Artie Fryer,
No.
Nicholas Glover, Don Skelton,
Yes.
Ed Majersky,
Yes.
Jonathan Knudsen,
No.
Sharon Gamond,
No.
Terrence Trott,
No.
Rick Richmond,
No.
Joshua Frank.
No.
The motion fails 15-3.
All right, thank you, committee members. Josh, I heard your plea for moving along to an action item, but I do want to ask the committee if they would entertain a conversation with Secretary Gwynn, who has joined us on the phone and has asked for a moment of the committee's time.
I would object to that.
We have one objection. Any other objection? Johnny, if you would allow Secretary Gwynn to come online, we would welcome him to the committee.
Secretary, I made you a panelist. I think you can unmute yourself.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, sir, you are.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, Mr. Chair, I did want to just take one moment to come in and address a topic that was brought up. I came into the room with my staff. The CAC obviously performs an important function within the TPO. You also have rules of decorum, and I would expect that you would expect your members to follow those rules of decorum. I don't know that coming out and accusing our staff, myself, others of deliberately lying to anyone is something that falls within those limits of decorum unless you have some sort of factual evidence to show that. My staff has never lied, and they have not come into the community and misrepresented. We have never spent as much time in a community as we have for the downtown interchange project. I am sorry if some folks misunderstood what was being presented, but everything that was shown showed there would be no right-of-way impacts. In the 35 years that I've been in this business, that term has been used on every PD&E that I've ever seen without right-of-way impacts. It means we're not buying any more right-of-way. We did not buy any more right-of-way. We have attempted to work with Mr. Fernandez. We have shown him several times where he was wrong, but I know as attorney, he probably doesn't want to bring up facts that don't support his case. He keeps referring to different types of charts that were shown and drawings, and it said it didn't show something. Well, then we'll show him the 3 slides later that did show what he was talking about, but he doesn't want to acknowledge that. What I'd ask, Chair, and I don't expect any further conversation, I'm just asking you to please allow for proper decorum. And if anyone wants to refer to the Department of Transportation staff as liars, we will formally object to that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretary Gwynn. Josh.
Yes, I would just ask that, that same level of decorum be applied to folks calling in as well. I found that rather accusatory and addressing somebody individually on this board. I believe that would not fly underneath the TPO board's standards of decorum to address an individual of the board specifically in accusation. So I would expect that that would be held on this board as well.
Okay. We will now move into our action items on our agenda.
Point of order.
Nicole Rice.
I don't think that can stop where that just stopped. That was outside, like my hand's shaking. That was very threatening. And we just had a conversation about ways that we have to be in regards to sunshine or all the things that we've done about the thing. And I'm sorry, there's been dishonesty. So Mr. Gwynn can say whatever he wants. But yet again, this is a citizens committee. To have the head of the district come on here and threaten Mr. Fernandez and other board members personally is absolutely outside the scope of normalcy of procedure, and this needs to be addressed. I feel threatened personally by Mr. Gwynn.
All right, Nicole, thank you for your opinion. I think it's important for us to move on. We're now approaching 20 minutes to 12. We're going to take up the next action item.
I would just like the record to reflect that Mr. Gwynn just threatened a board member, called a board member a liar, utilized his stance as, by the way, a former JAG attorney and attorney, and disrespected Mr. Fernandez.
Nicole, I respect your opinion, but I'm going to move on to our action items. I don't want to have this debate today, and I really don't want to have it continue. If you have an issue with Secretary Gwynn, I suggest you take it up directly with him.
Well, we can see.
First action under TIP amendments is for the Gibsonton Drive PD&E study, the HART maintenance facility amendment.
Good morning, Connor McDonald, TPO staff. I'm here to present the TIP amendments on the HART maintenance facility in Gibsonton Drive widening study. Can everybody see my screen and hear me all right?
I think we can, yes. Go ahead.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we have notification kind of in the way. I don't know if it's possible for staff to clear that.
Okay, doesn't show on my screen, thank you. Johnny, there is
Network
something
connection
covering
notice.
up the slide for us. It's a slow network connection message. It is covering up part of the slide here in the meeting room.
Let me get in contact with our support staff. I'll have them stop in and see what they can do. Give me just a few minutes.
Okay.
Is it all right if Connor proceeds while we try to resolve this?
I was going to suggest that we proceed with the presentation, and he just cleared it. So, Connor, go ahead. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Again, Connor McDonald, TPO staff. I'm here to present tip amendments on the HART maintenance facility and Gibsonton Drive widening study. So there's 3 amendments requested by the Florida Department of Transportation to add funds to the year 2022. 2 amendments are related to the HART maintenance facility. So the first one is to remove $4 million of SU funds from the HART bus replacements pool. The second amendment is to add the $4 million to the HART heavy maintenance facility. The third amendment is a Gibsonton Drive widening study for a PD&E study for the addition of $201,000. So the HART maintenance facility amendments came from a board TPO directive in November 2021 to move funds from the bus replacement pool to the facility. I had the chance to tour the maintenance facility myself, and I saw firsthand the issues the facility faces. For one, the facility is downhill, sort of in a basin, so it's prone to heavy flooding from sheets of water that come flowing into the area. It was originally built in the 80s as a large truck repair facility, so the design itself isn't conducive to an efficient process. One, due to low ceilings, the buses can't be raised for repair in half of the garage area. And in addition, the counterintuitive design means the buses must make a 90-degree turn to go from fueling to washing. Not only are these issues great in and of themselves, they also make it difficult to retain talent, as many mechanics have chosen to work at more sustainable facilities. I also have some photos to share with you. In the top left, you can see where the buses cannot be raised. In the top right, there's cracking in the concrete, and the flooding area is cracking. In the bottom left, it's difficult to make that 90-degree turn from you're looking straight forward at the fueling station to the left at the washing station. And the fourth photograph shows residue from interior flooding of the facility. So the first amendment is to remove the SU funds totaling $4 million from the bus replacement item. And the second amendment is to add those funds to the HART maintenance facility program. The next amendment is for the addition of funds for a PD&E study on Gibsonton Drive from Fernhill Drive near I-75 to US 301. PD&E studies, as defined by FDOT, ensures transportation projects are developed with current engineering standards, project costs, and minimization of social and environmental impact. The project will include some public engagement, including a kickoff meeting, small group meetings, and a public hearing. The amendment is to add $201,000 for a PD&E study in the year 2022. As part of our public outreach pilot, we have taken some measures to inform the public. This includes the posting of 3 signs, a web page, a newsletter, press release, and social media posts. With that, the recommended action today is to approve the 3 amendments to the fiscal year 21-22 TIP and recommend approval to the TPO board. With that, I conclude my presentation and happy to take any comments or questions.
Mr. Chair, this is Terrence. Oh, sorry. Apologies.
Are there questions of Connor McDonald regarding the proposed TIP amendments? Terrence, go ahead.
I was just going to move that we approve the amendments.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
A second.
A second from Mr. Gibsonton. Is there discussion? Mr. Fernandez?
Yes, Chair, there is. I made an inquiry of TPO staff anticipatory to this meeting to identify these 3 TIP amendments with reference to their phasing as to which ones are in beyond the point of no return, if you will, and which are not. I don't know who gets to respond to that question now on the record, but I'll make that question again.
I'll field that one, Connor, if you don't mind. Johnny Wong, TPO staff. Regarding the two amendments, the first to remove funding for bus replacements and reallocate it toward heavy maintenance facility, that project is in construction. Didn't actually go through the same process that you might expect of a normal transportation project because it's just it's a building. There is not too many, there aren't going to be really opportunities for the public to comment on the construction or design of the building. The second one, or rather the third, the Gibsonton Drive PD&E, this is just project development and engineering. What will culminate from the PD&E study is environmental approval. Following that, design will be the next phase. So if this advances into design after PD&E, that will mark the point at which it crosses that threshold and would be considered in design. So while this PD&E study is going on, the TPO would still have the opportunity to remove it from the tip if it so desires, up until the point at which it moves into the next phase of the project.
That address your question?
Well, I guess my concern is, does that switch from one phase to the other occur behind the curtain? Or does it occur at a point in time when the TPO board will actually have an opportunity to act before that phase crossover occurs?
That kind of remains to be seen. So it is on the tip priority list. It is my belief, I don't have a representative of Hillsborough County on the call to confirm, but I must believe that Hillsborough County would be seeking to use federal funds to advance it to the next stage or next phase. And so if it does come up either at the June public hearing in 2023 or a tip amendment following that, we will have flagged it for review, and we would definitely notify both the committees and the board that it is about to cross that threshold. Does that answer your question?
Well, it answers the question for me that there's lack of clarity, so that will affect my vote, but that's enough for me.
Yeah, I have to apologize. One of the Hillsborough County project managers was slated to attend today and answer questions. They were unable to make it. We reached out to some other staff and didn't get a response in time. So I'm here trying to be the information provider, but I'm not the PM, so I can only speak on behalf of the TPO.
Well, Johnny, let me ask you a question procedurally. I think two of these tip amendments are inextricably tied together. The third one regarding the PD&E study in Gibsonton Drive is a completely separate issue. Am I understanding that correctly?
Our intention was to have all three amendments passed with one motion. It's, of course, the committee's pleasure to separate them if you want. You could either make a motion to approve one amendment and not the other, or you could approach them separately.
Okay. Hey, Christine.
I'd like to speak to the Gibsonton Drive widening. I live in that area. It is a real issue, and it's not just an issue for commuter traffic. It's an issue for the neighborhoods near it. What's happened is, everybody is aware of the dysfunction on Big Bend and the Big Bend I-75 interchange. Well, what's happened is the people that live down near Big Bend travel north to Gibsonton. So Gibsonton is now, it's a parking lot. It just stops trying to get on 275 or I-75. So what people are doing is they are then taking shortcuts to avoid Gibsonton. So they are taking now East Bay South to Sims and across. East Bay and Sims go through neighborhoods. These neighborhood roads are not designed for commuter traffic. So by widening Gibsonton Drive, you're going to relieve some of that pressure on these neighborhoods that are not designed for that traffic. So I am very much in support of this.
Okay. Further comment from the committee, Josh Frank?
Yes, I'll try and keep it brief. I think in light of what we've heard today and discussed at length regarding the tip and sort of the framework that I discussed, the lens at which I think we should be viewing these projects, I don't necessarily feel comfortable enough understanding exactly what this PD&E is going to involve. So out of principle, again, based off what we discussed earlier, what I've talked about before, I'm going to be voting no out of principle because I think we need to see more information on these projects before we put them on the table. Thank you.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would just say that, the whole purpose of PD&E is, all that sort of preliminary look at what the issues are. I mean, you're not going to have detailed characteristics identified as before you do a PD&E. I mean, that's what the point of the PD&E is. So at the conclusion of the PD&E, you can certainly decide, I like it or I don't like it. But, PD&E is just a stage one to see what the alternatives are.
Other comments from committee?
I would agree with Ed. Certainly he's more experienced in actually conducting these PD&Es than I am, but Gibsonton Drive was flagged and highlighted in our long-range transportation plan as a local roadway that was severely congested. So it was at least implicitly approved to evaluate it as part of the LRTP adoption, and it has been on the tip for quite a while. So we've known that Gibsonton Drive is a problem, and it's our hope that at the PD&E phase, they will provide some very preliminary ideas for how to alleviate that congestion. Again, what this will culminate in, if moved forward, is just the approval of the environmental, and then the public will have an opportunity to provide feedback during subsequent phases.
Okay. Other comments from committee members online? I'm hearing none, and I don't see any hands. Mr. Fernandez.
Christina, I just want to make this comment. I could not be more supportive of someone coming from the community expressing concern. God knows those are the moccasins I've been wearing, so I hear you. My problem is with relation to something that Ed just got done saying, and even Johnny. We've been told, for instance, looking at the downtown interchange projects, that back in 2019, that they were already beyond the point of no return. And I want to remind people that in 2019, the downtown interchange projects were just seeing the light of day. They were barely out of the womb at that point in time. They were not considered by, as a matter of presentation to the Civic Association until January of 2020. And what we've been told is, effectively, they were already beyond the point of no return before we even knew what they were. So I have a problem with the idea that, PD&E is not an issue because it's so preliminary. It has been used as a weapon against us. So unless there is somebody somewhere that is willing to say and write it in blood that this project is not beyond the point of no return, and that point of no return will be well marked in the future so we can take action, I can't support that particular tip amendment for those reasons. It's not that I'm not supportive of the community. I'm not supportive, nor do I trust the process.
All right, fair enough. Art Pringle?
I guess a question for Josh and Rick. If I made a motion to amend that basically said that we would move forward on this subject to this not being considered by DOT, and let's be less than a guess, but subject to it not being part of point of no return, would that mediate any concerns?
I'm not sure that kind of a motion would be binding on anyone. It's aspirational.
Well, all this is aspirational. I'm sure you
And I'll remind the committee that our ability to act is to make recommendations to the TPO board. So we've actually been granted a lot of flexibility here in recent months, which is good. But we're being asked today to recommend these tip amendments, these three that have been proposed. We have a motion and a second. If it's the wish of the committee, we can take a roll call. Otherwise, I'm willing to accept the voice vote.
Mr. Chair, just quickly, are we not doing these independently, or are we doing them together?
The motion is to accept all three.
Okay.
Chair, I would also like to take this opportunity to remind the committee that the statute that has been discussed at length this morning doesn't speak to the inability for the TPO board to remove projects from Hillsborough County. So Hillsborough County is actually requesting this TIP amendment. It's initiated, the process is initiated by FDOT because FDOT is going to release the funds to the county to conduct the PD&E, but the state statute doesn't speak to requiring Hillsborough County's consent to remove the project. It only speaks to MPO and FDOT. I hope I didn't muddy the waters with that.
Okay. I'd like to take a vote on this motion. We have a motion and a second. Point, do you have a further comment?
Would the chair just entertain me and list out the 3 items for everybody before we vote? That's
Sure.
acceptable.
Sure. There are 3 TIP amendments that are identified in the summary in our packet. First one is the HART bus replacement, where funds are being removed, is my understanding, from that TIP amendment. Those funds are being moved to the second TIP amendment, which is the financing or the funding of the heavy maintenance facility for HART. The third TIP amendment is the authorization of a PD&E study on Gibsonton Drive from Fern Hill Drive to US 301. Those are the 3 TIP amendments. Judge.
I'd like to make a substitute motion, if I may, to approve both the HART bus replacement pool amendment and the HART heavy maintenance facility amendment, but not the Gibson Drive widening study for reasons I previously mentioned.
We have a substitute motion which would supersede the motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Mr. Fernandez seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'd like to call for a roll call vote. Gail, if you would call the roll on the substitute motion to adopt the first 2 amendments. I'm paraphrasing Josh, adopt the first 2 and defer action on the third. Gail, please.
Bill Roberts,
No.
Rick Fernandez,
Yes.
Carolyn Brown,
Yes.
Hoyt Prindle,
Yes.
Christina Bosworth,
No.
Miaza Morrison,
No.
Stephen Hollenkamp,
Sorry, I'm still gonna vote for the Gibsonton one after this,
That'd be still there.
right? Or it could be, I'll vote yes.
I thought if we do this, we're voting against it.
This is a motion to defer action on the third amendment, which is the Gibson Drive PD&E study. That's what I understood, Josh.
Correct.
Okay, so your motion is to pass the 2 and the other one to agree that we're not passing.
It would still be available for pass. You can still make a motion.
Yeah.
To approve it.
Should we go against the
The motion on the floor is to defer action on it and to approve the first 2.
Correct. Okay. I'll vote no.
You voted no. Okay, continue here.
Nicole Rice,
Yes.
Alexis Boback,
No.
Christina Costa,
No.
Artie Fryer,
No.
Nicholas Glover, Don Skelton,
No.
Ed Majerski,
No.
Jonathan Knudsen,
No.
Sharon Gamond,
No.
Terrence Trott,
No.
Rick Richmond,
No.
Joshua Frank.
Yes.
The motion fails 13-5.
All right, thank you. We'll return to the original motion, which is to adopt all 3 TIP amendments as recommended by staff. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll on that motion, which would adopt all three and recommend them to the TPO board for their consideration. Please call the roll.
Okay, before I do so, I'm going to make a note. Mr. Glover did communicate via chat that he was unable to answer me, and he did vote no on that last one.
Okay.
So that's going to be 14-3.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're back to the first motion for all three. Okay. Bill Roberts.
Yes.
Rick Fernandez.
No.
Carolyn Brown.
No.
Hoyt Prindle.
Yes.
Christina Bosworth.
Yes.
Miaza Morrison.
Yes.
Stephen Hollenkamp.
Yes.
Nicole Rice.
No.
Alexis Boback.
Yes.
Christina Costa.
Yes.
Artie Fryer.
Yes.
Nicholas Glover. He votes no. Don Skelton.
Yes.
Ed Majewski.
Yes.
Jonathan Knudsen.
Yes.
Sharon Gamond.
Yes.
Terrence Trott.
Yes.
Rick Richmond.
Yes.
Joshua Frank.
No.
The motion passes 14-5.
Okay. Motion is adopted. Thank you, committee members, who worked through that one. I must apologize to the committee. I have a prior commitment that's going to cause me to leave. Fortunately, my leaving will not impede our forum. And I'm going to ask Vice Chair Fernandez if he will take the gavel for the remainder of the meeting. We have one action item remaining, so I know that all of us would appreciate it if you can at least get through that one action item. Here's the gavel. Thank you, committee, for a lot of your work. We're just at 9:45 items, so we're moving right along. Thank you. I'll see you again.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
All right, if I understand the baton and gavel pass correctly, we are now on action item, agenda item 6 Bravo, Commuter Benefits Ordinance Request Letter. Sarah Hendricks cover to make the presentation of our 10:15 agenda item. Sarah, you up there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
God bless you. Yeah, sure can.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Sarah Hendricks. I'm a senior research associate at the Center for Urban Transportation Research at University of South Florida. And the purpose of this action is to approve recommending a letter for the Hillsborough TPO to use to encourage the 4 governments in Hillsborough to consider adopting a commuter benefits ordinance. It's also referred to as a transit benefits ordinance. Last month, I gave a presentation about commuter benefits ordinances in coordination with Christina Costa of Pedal Power Promoters, as well as Ken Bowden of Commute Tampa Bay, which is the regional commuter assistance program that's part of TBARTA. And this recommendation aims to provide a starting point, a doable action to give a boost to public transit. That is, this is an action that's business friendly, it's employer friendly, it's employee friendly. And as stated in the letter, a commuter benefits ordinance as proposed here would require employers to do 2 things. The first is to provide information to their employees about all the many transportation options and services that already exist in Hillsborough and regionally that employees can use to travel to and from work. And these are things including like the free guaranteed emergency ride home that many employees don't realize they have access to. And the third paragraph in the letter goes into more detail about all of the resources available to local governments to help them, as well as resources to employers to get information. The second requirement that this proposed commuter benefits ordinance would have is that employers be required to offer to set aside up to $280 per month per employee in gross earned income. And that would allow the employee to pay for their commuting expenses pre-tax. Specifically, it would be commuting expenses if they want to buy a transit pass or want to form a van pool. So it's important to know that the Federal Internal Revenue Code already enables employers to do this, and this is known as qualified transportation fringe benefits. Most employers already provide a transportation subsidy in the form of a free parking space, and that's whether the employee wants it or not. So if you don't drive or you don't have a car, you cannot use this benefit, and this is not equitable. So with the commuter benefits ordinance as proposed here, it does not require the employer to provide any kind of a subsidy or anything extra. It does put money in the pocket of the employee because less income is being taxed, and it also can save businesses on payroll taxes. And so then once again, the last letter provides, it kind of spells out the many resources that exist in this community that would help employers get the word out, as well as work with local governments to help them craft an ordinance if they would like to pursue this. And I guess I would also say that I've been giving presentations, or I'm scheduled to give presentations to the other committees, Hillsborough committees. I gave a presentation about commuter benefits ordinance last week to the Livable Roadways Committee. They voted unanimously to approve it to proceed. They support the CAC's interest in this. I'm going to be giving a presentation similarly to about commuter benefits ordinances to the TAC next week.
Is that the end of your presentation, Sarah?
It is. It is.
Okay. And there is a formal ask coming from you of this committee, correct?
Yes. So the request is that the CAC approve recommending to the Hillsborough TPO to send a letter, and that's the letter that's in your packet, to send a letter to their member local governments, that's Hillsborough County and the 3 cities within Hillsborough, to ask these local governments to consider adopting commuter benefits ordinances.
Okay, thank you. I see a hand. Josh Frank?
Yeah, I'll be making the motion, but I just wanted to say I had the opportunity to see this letter and the presentation before T-BARDA's CAC, which I also sit on, and also had an opportunity to provide input, of which I needed to give none because it's an excellently written letter. So I'm in full support of it, and I'd like to make the motion that this board approve request. Okay, the full board to craft one.
Let's hold roll just a second. All right, there's a motion to approve the letter. Yep. There's a second by Christina Costa. Now, is there discussion? I see a hand from Stephen Pelican.
I bet I would love this letter. I haven't seen it. In the agenda packet, when I try to open the agenda, it says 404 error, and it's not on the screen here. Could we just have the letter, I guess just shown here? Is it a long letter?
No, it's a page and a half. There you go. Thank you. Thank you, Johnny. I think it's beyond this.
Chair, would you like me to read it for folks who can't see the screen?
I would suggest go ahead and read it. It's fine. Do your thing.
Okay. Dear recipient, first of all, this is addressed to some of our contacts within the local governments. Our request is going to be for the TPO board to approve it, transmit it to the addressees, and then transmit it to the governing boards for consideration. So it says, dear recipient, on the recommendation of our Citizens Advisory Committee, the Hillsborough TPO encourages the local governments of Hillsborough County to implement innovative practices in support of a multimodal transportation system. As of 2019, only 75% of Hillsborough's interstate miles and 81% of non-interstate miles allow for reliable travel times. In these two areas of performance, Hillsborough lags behind its peers across the state. Specifically, the TPO supports and encourages its local government partners to consider adopting commuter benefit ordinances. Commuter benefits ordinances are already in use in at least 9 U.S. cities in the state of New Jersey. Effective commuter benefits ordinances often require large employers defined as 100 or more workers to provide information about the commuter transportation options available to employees. Second, large employers offer their employees the option of setting aside some amount of gross income up to the limits specified by legislation to purchase commuter transportation. If adopted locally, employees could choose to use the pre-tax income for HART transit passes or T-BART van pool expenses. More information about qualified transportation fringe benefits is in the newly updated Free Commuter Benefits Guide ebook. Transportation services and assistance are provided by T-BART's Commute Tampa Bay in coordination with HART. Employers can receive assistance to provide information about commuter transportation alternatives from Commute Tampa Bay and from 3 transportation management organizations in Hillsborough County, including the Tampa Downtown Partnership, New North Transportation Alliance, and the West Shore Alliance. Technical assistance to local governments in crafting commuter benefits ordinances can be provided by the Florida Statewide TDM Clearinghouse at the USF Qatar. We've also attached some examples of adopted ordinances. One is from Berkeley, and I think the other one was from Seattle, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Okay, is that the end of the narration?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, John. Thank you again, Sarah. All right, we have a motion seconded. Is there any more discussion in the room? I see no further discussion in the room. Is there discussion from anyone online?
I do not see any hands raised or comments, Chair.
All right, so move this forward for a vote. Do y'all want a roll call, or are you fine with a voice affirmation?
Voice affirmation.
Okay, then we have a motion, seconded, submitted now for vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? It would seem the ayes have it. Record will reflect the motion is passed. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Go forth, multiply to good things. All right, that is the last action item that I show on the fixed agenda. Does anyone else have an item that would require a quorum?
Briefly, Mr. Chair, if I may be recognized.
Mr. Prindle is recognized.
Just in some of the discussion, going back to Cameron Clark this morning, I would like to make a motion that the CAC through TPO staff request FDOT to produce one of their staff attorneys to come before us and give a presentation on FDOT's legal obligations when doing construction projects that are in the tip.
All right, if I understand the motion is to have FDOT legal representative.
Correct.
Up here.
Have a staff request.
Have TPO staff request an FDOT legal representative to appear and give a briefing to this committee about FDOT's legal obligations for projects that are in the tip or projects that they're building here in the community.
Second that.
All right, there's a motion by Mr. Prindle, and was it seconded by Ms. Bosworth?
Yes.
Okay, is there discussion? No discussion in the room. Is there discussion online?
No, sir, I don't see any hands or comments in the chat.
All right, as with the last motion, is the committee comfortable with a voice vote on this motion?
Yes. Yes.
I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding up and down. All right, all in favor of the motion, please signify by aye.
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 Anyone opposed, nay? Hearing no opposition, record should reflect the motion has passed. Thank you, Hoyt. Any other actions requiring a vote of the committee requiring, let me restate, a quorum for action? Mr. Prindle.
I'll actually make another motion to adjourn the meeting and defer the status reports to our next scheduled meeting.
All right, there's a motion, there's a second. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn?
No, but just an apology to Amber, who is so patient.
Chair, if I may say something before you take the vote. Before we adjourn, I was hoping that we could at least vote on next month's agenda topics because we're starting to form a backlog. We have at least 3 action items that we know of already coming forward next month. And now that we're deferring some of these items to April, that leaves the potential for 7 status reports. So before we adjourn, if we could do a quick vote to see which ones the committee prefers hearing.
Well, I don't know what items you're referring to because frankly, I did not get to that part of the agenda package myself. So what would we be voting on? And actually, hold on. We had a motion to adjourn and we had a second. That's on the table now. Is there any further discussion?
Chair, point of order. Who was the second on that motion?
Hey, Josh Frank.
Josh Frank.
Thank you.
My question is for Dr. Wong. Can we do the selection through a doodle or some other electronic means after we adjourn? Can we prioritize next month? He wants us to sort of do a weighted value of what we're going to try to get in next month.
I understand.
And so I think if we could handle that electronically, I would prefer to do it that way.
Yes, Christine, I think that at the very most, this will take approximately a minute. All I have to do is share a website with you all. You can log on at your leisure and cast a vote. I'll tally all those sometime between now and next month's meeting, and that'll really help me set the agenda. As I stated, we have 4 potential presentations that have been brought forth either at the request of some committee members or status updates that are kind of timely. One is City of Tampa Vision Zero Action Plan update. Second is a 2045 plan refresher on funding scenarios. Third is intro to new TPO studies. Fourth is the UPWP preliminary draft presentation that we deferred. And now we will have, in addition to that, the PD&E study, which is 7A on today's agenda, 7C, which is CAC committee composition, and 7D, which was a committee request to have a members introduction roundtable. So,
Johnny?
Yes, sir.
Johnny, this is Rick Fernandez. I'd ask you to tack something on that was actually mentioned earlier during this meeting. I don't want to bring it forward because Chair Roberts is not here. But that's the motion to provide guidance to the CAC chair regarding format of committee reports to the TPO board. Now that we have digressed, however, beyond the motion was to adjourn. It was seconded. Is there any other discussion on the motion to adjourn? In the room or online? Josh Frank, you had a...
Just very quickly, Dr. Wong, I don't know if it's possible, but since we have such a long list of things, to cover potentially next month or the month after, would it be possible for staff to arrange a special second afternoon hearing or something like that that's maybe able to run a little bit longer for us to sort of knock through all of these things at once instead of perhaps in the weekday mornings, give us some time to, after work hours to do that, to give us a special session. I'd be amenable to that.
If you're asking me, yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. However, I'm not the limiting factor. It really comes down to whether or not we can get a quorum and whether we can get attendance of the rest of the committee members. So I'm definitely on board. I'll work to see what I can arrange. However, I will say that, making those arrangements and securing a room in time before April is going to be kind of a challenge, but I'll see what I can do.
Thank you. All right. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Who's the nay, please?
It was Terrence Trapp.
All right, we have one nay vote. We're adjourned.
Thank you all.
Oh, no. Do not know.